gals and guys. This is Michael Ferrari of Cinema to Meep. Welcome to the 25th bonus Patreon episode. Joining me again on this zombie adventure is Ara Alishan. Welcome back, Ara.
Hey, Meep. Thanks for having me back on, buddy.
It's been so long since we last talked.
Yeah, jeez. Let's see if we remember how to do this.
You did the math. How many days ago was it?
It's less than a week since we last recorded. I think it says 6 days, maybe.
Wow. A record for retro movie love.
Yeah, it's pretty intense for sure.
We're back with yet another episode. We did episode 60. We covered what we deem our favorite zombie Living Dead movies with the Living Dead podcast, and we wanted to properly tribute the king, the godfather, the master of all zombie films.
Yes.
Himself, George A. Romero, and talk about his zombie films. And so we're going to do that today. We'll go in the order of their release and then talk about some of the things that kind of sprung from those movies. Some zombie babies, right? And literally, I think. That's exciting. That's something, we wanted to. I've always wanted to do a George A. Romero podcast. When he passed away in 2017, it was totally planning on doing one, but I never got around to it. And I felt really guilty about that. I felt guilty about the same way with Tobe Hooper passing away.
Right.
We did a Wes Craven one when he passed away, and so I kind of wanted to properly tribute him back then. So finally getting to something, 3 years later. I can't believe it's been 3 years since he's gone, and his presence is definitely. His lack of a presence is definitely felt, but going through these movies and going through just watching interviews with him and on the extras and stuff, that was comforting. It felt like George was here with us in a way, and that was nice to do that. And that's the beauty of these movies. That's the beauty of physical media too. So you can watch those extras and commentaries and stuff to hear his voice and he always gave really good commentaries on his discs too. So it's something else I would recommend. Besides watching the films, listening to him talk about those films. I think he always had something really interesting to say about them, and much more than we can clearly. But since he made these films, it was interesting doing this podcast because I was a little bit hesitant at first because I feel like a lot of George Romero's movies kind of speak for themselves. They have a lot of subtext. They have a lot of text. There's a lot going on intellectually with them. I feel like they do speak for themselves. But it'd be fun. I think it's just fun talking to you about his movies, even if a lot of them are pretty well known and a lot of people understand them and their themes and so on. But I'm happy we're here doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm honored to be on with you for such a fun topic. I do think that George. I do think his filmography is good enough, certainly, to warrant its own episode for sure. From top to bottom, there's just a lot of great variety in there. But I also like just kind of focusing on a sort of a running series he had going throughout, which is what we're doing, because that's unique in a filmmaker to have one person have his vision kind of honored over and over and over again, where he's not only writing these movies but directing these movies at very different points in time, at very different points in history. And that's pretty special. I can't think of a lot of people who have that kind of opportunity. So while I would love to talk about some of his other movies, which there's so many we could touch on, I think it's pretty cool to kind of narrow it down to these, Living Dead movies that we sort of have already dug into with the other podcast this month, and now kind of getting into where that all came from. So it just feels right, and it feels perfect for for Halloween too.
Yeah, you could say that all of those films we talked about really were birth
Absolutely.
from Night of the Living Dead, the first movie we'll talk about today. And
Uh-huh.
that's just interesting that one director can have that much influence over film and over cinema, and it's just amazing. And I was just going through his filmography and looking at how many feature films he made, and he made 17 feature films total, including the one that was just discovered. Hopefully, we'll see that. It's called The Amusement Park. And so 17 films, and out of those 17 films, he did 6 films which are about about zombies.
Right.
So it's kind of unique for a filmmaker to have that theme just be so forefront in his in their filmography. A lot of filmmakers have themes that they often spread out through their filmography. You'll see a lot of the themes running through their films, like John Carpenter, David Cronenberg, and so on. But you don't see a director stick so closely to just to one thing, like a zombie movie, for example.
Yeah.
So it's very unique and interesting that he had a lot to say about these films, and he said it in different ways through each film, and so it's really cool.
Or yes, yeah, absolutely. Well said. I think it's a really fun series to get into. There's obviously varying quality as there is in all things, but one thing that is definitely clear is that he always had a vision and he always had something to say, like you mentioned. So it's going to be fun kind of just touching on that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm excited for that. We're not going to do recently seen because we recorded that episode 6 days ago. There hasn't been a lot, honestly. I mean, we've been watching the Romero movies basically this weekend, and some other random things, and we don't need to talk about it. I will plug though the Hysteria Continues episode that I appeared on recently for Alone in the Dark from 1982. That was so much fun to record with the Hysteria Continues gang. I am a big fan of that movie, and listen to it if you haven't listened to it already. That's Alone in the Dark from Hysteria Continues. That's a Jack Shoulder slasher film from 1982. And our pal, Ben Schur, of course, he has his show, the Eli Roth's History of Horror, which he's an executive producer on. He wrote content on that one. He did some of the interviews. Please check that one out. That is the current season is airing. Season 2 is airing right now on AMC. They're up to episode 3 as of today, and so that's something you should definitely check out.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's get into George Romero films. And we'll start with a radio spot for his first zombie movie. Here it is.
This is the sound of a normal heart. Now, listen to that same heart subjected to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead. The dead who live on living flesh. The dead whose haunted souls hunt the living. The living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Night of the living dead. A bizarre adventure in fear. An experience in shock more shattering than your strangest nightmare. Night of the living dead. A night of total terror.
The dead come back to life in this eerie, gruesome horror flick guaranteed to give you at least one bad night's sleep. Night of the Living Dead centers on a group of people taking shelter in an abandoned farmhouse to escape the clutches of a band of murderous zombies. This film is not for the squeamish. And that description was courtesy of the Media Home Entertainment VHS of Night of the Living Dead. So Night of the Living Dead is a movie, of course, that um, spawned an entire subgenre, like you mentioned. Uh, the plot seems fairly simple, and it's got a pretty small cast of characters, which I'm usually a fan of. And it's kind of a classic that I think people, even non-horror fans or genre fans, are familiar with. It kind of transcends that. I would compare it, as far as its like stature, to something like John Carpenter's Halloween, in that a lot of things came out of this. Um, and the subgenre kind of became its own thing. But if you trace it back to its roots, it's a pretty classy, classy movie. Something that you wouldn't necessarily expect, and it's a really smart movie too. So I am a fan of this movie, of course. I don't know anyone who isn't. But I will say, maybe kind of controversially, like, it's not one of my favorites. Not one of my favorite zombie movies, and not one of my favorite George Romero movies. I think it's great. I think it's really well done, like I mentioned. And I do typically find myself really drawn to like black and white horror movies in general. There's something about that it's always appealed to me, the look, the feel of those movies. And I think it works here too. And there's some really strong performances in this one too. Of course, I mean, it's famously, has Dwayne Jones as Ben, which was sort of a big deal at the time, having this African American hero as the lead of a film like this. So I really like his performance. I really like everyone's performance. Really, I think the Barbara, the Judith O'Dea is great. Cooper is perfect for what he is and what he's supposed to be, played by Carl Hardman. I mean, the cast is just it's solid all around. The zombies are pretty memorable for the most part. And of course, you've got George Romero at the helm, so it's just the direction is very tight and really well done. I will say, and this is something I've kind of mentioned in the last podcast, I'm a big fan of kind of more effects heavy zombie movies that we got a little bit later on. Once the like stuff that we kind of started seeing, I guess, in the mid 80s, where you started to really see like the decomposing corpses, different levels, obviously, and the creative gore effects, and kind of some of the craziness that comes with that. And I always found those kinds of zombies a little bit scarier and a little bit cooler, and just a little bit more my speed. Maybe that's just kind of what I grew up watching, since I didn't really start with this series from the beginning, and that's something we can talk about as we get to some of the other movies. But I sort of saw things out of order and grew up loving different entries. So by the time I was old enough to appreciate something like Night of the Living Dead, I certainly did appreciate it, and I think it's great. It just wasn't really my kind of movie necessarily. Um, I think the it's sort of, I guess it's a little bit hypocritical, because I do love something like Carnival of Souls, which came out like a few years earlier than this, where it's just you've got the they're not zombies, and I don't want to spoil anything, but the kind of menacing characters in that are very similar, in that they're just wearing kind of pale makeup with like dark around their eyes, and which is kind of how the zombies are made up here. So for whatever reason, it works in that for me. But when there's zombies, I'm a little harder on it for whatever reason. So again, it's just effects wise, it's not really, it doesn't really scratch that itch for me. But as far as atmosphere, as far as great performances, as far as a lot of interesting character details and dynamics and stuff, I think it's pretty great. And I do have a lot more to say about some of the choices that were made in this movie, plot-wise, that have always bothered me. And that they bother me, but I also think it's great because it makes it more realistic in a lot of ways. And of course, the background of this movie is also really interesting. I'm sure it's kind of well known, so I didn't do too much research. But as everyone knows, this is a public domain title, or it was at least, since its release. So poor George Romero, for his masterpiece, for the movie that made him famous, he did not financially benefit from it the way he should have. So I'm very glad he had such a great career afterwards. And I'm not sure if that's something you want to touch on. I'll just mention it like that and kind of leave it there. But before I get into some of the things with the plot and the characters that I wanted to talk about, I would love to hear your thoughts on Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead was a movie I watched on TV as a little kid. So this is actually the first of the Dead movies that I watched.
Oh, awesome.
It aired on New York City. I think it was either WPX or WOR. I can't remember now, but it was definitely aired on TV at night. And I was just like sitting in front of the television, just like entranced by this movie, and just it's the black and white creepiness of it all, the way the camera moved. Something about it. I wasn't like a film kid yet. It was that was yet to come. But something about the way it was made, it made it feel like a real experience. Like I was watching something that was unfolding. Not something that was filmed and staged, and it really did something to me. It really it scared me. It made me feel like I was part of something else, and something that I just wanted to know more about. I wanted to know why this movie had such power over me as a little kid.
That's awesome.
And I think a lot of that definitely attributes to the skill of George Romero as a filmmaker so early in his career. Clearly, he was already, out of the gate, a master of a craftsman. Even though the movie has its flaws and it is very low budget and run and gun kind of style, but the choices that he made as a filmmaker, on the fly, all those things that add up to such a great film that we deemed a classic, and a movie that's been preserved for time because of what it's done for film.
Absolutely.
is clearly apparent in this film when I watch it. And watching it on the Criterion Blu-ray and its beautifully remastered glory is a way to really appreciate this film. I mean, this is a movie that's looked pretty shitty over the years for a long time on VHS and murky VHS copies and the many, many bootlegs over time, because like you said, this was a movie that was heavily released because it didn't have a proper copyright. When they had the original title, which I think was Night of the Flesh Eaters or Night of the Ghouls, I can't remember now, but they had an original title that was changed by the distributor, which I believe was Walter Reed Organization, and they forgot to put a proper copyright on the new title, and of course this led to many people claiming it for themselves. And so, like you said, George Romero never saw much money from this movie, which is crazy to think, because it's this movie played in drive-ins for many years. It played on, and like again, heavily bootlegged when it came to home video and so on. It screened in many, many screenings, even in 1978 for its 10th anniversary. New Line released it in theaters. when they were distributing things like older films and cult films. So it's kind of amazing that this movie really is. I mean, it's not amazing that it's held up over the years, but it's amazing that it's become what it has, an empire of a film that so many other films have tried to copy it and try to emulate it in some way. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the filmmakers had good intentions to copy Night of the Living Dead, but there's a good deal of them that set out to make a cheap horror movie because those guys did it. They made a cheap horror movie, they threw some blood at the screen and some gore effects. Well, I could do that too. I think there was definitely, and there still is that mentality in certain budding filmmakers that horror is an easy way in or an entry point. I don't think George Romero's intentions were that. I think he really wanted to make something that reflected its time period. And certainly when you look at horror films over time, there's lots of horror films that reflect their time period, but many more of them which are just kind of more classical in their style or throwbacks or are caught up in the period horror, or just kind of very modern and just maybe not quite saying as much as they probably could. George Romero did not have that problem in his films. He always had something to say. That might have been a problem later on in these films, but we'll get to that. But I think he really had a clear vision here, and he was definitely inspired by what was going on in the culture, of course, racially, but also what was coming out of the problem, the trouble in Vietnam. That's just putting it lightly. Just the devastation that was happening in American culture of 1967 and going to 1968. It really was a very trying time for the United States, and here we are these years later, and it's kind of that way too. But you don't see filmmakers like George Romero now making these statements. And he was making a statement with this film. He wasn't trying to preach to an audience. He was trying to make a fun horror movie, and he certainly did. But he was also trying to do something a little bit more and elevate it. And this is from a guy who was making his money by doing commercials, by doing Mr. Rogers, videos for Mr. Rogers, and working out of Pittsburgh, and hustling, making money. And he had a clear vision, and he made his vision, along with a group of individuals who were more than up for this, and it became the classic that we now know as Night of the Living Dead, and spawned so much. And I've looking at it now on this Criterion, and really appreciating what it has done for film, but also the entertainment value from the actual film itself. It's so beautifully made for me. I just, even though it has flaws, I still think it's sumptuous, and it's black and white filming, and some of the performances are a little bit much, but I think there's also some heartfelt stuff, especially coming from some Dwayne Jones, and I really get into the drama of the characters and where it goes with that. And even though I know the story and I've seen it many times, I've seen the remakes and everything, I do get caught up in it, and that says a lot about a movie that's been around since 1968. So I'm a big fan. It really left an impact on me, and I'm glad I still feel it. I was very appreciative of that this go around.
Very cool.
What was I going to say? It was made. It cost $114 million. Cost $114,000. So pretty low budget. There's no box office tally for this movie because of that whole copyright fiasco. So there's no way of really knowing how much this movie made over time. But I'm sure it's a pretty healthy number. but it's here to stay, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really well said. I will say that I would have loved to have seen this when I was a kid. I think that would have been a really cool experience, and I can only imagine kind of seeing it through those eyes, especially at a time where we hadn't been maybe as exposed or so numb to these kinds of movies, since we've seen so many now, because there really was nothing like this before. I mean, I kind of just compared it to Carnival of Souls as far as how the zombies look to me, but that's a completely different vibe, completely different kind of story. Like you said, this felt more like you were watching something unfolding, and the way that he cleverly uses the radio broadcast, and the characters themselves don't really know what's going on. They're just kind of sharing information with each other. Like it feels almost like something that maybe another generation would have experienced with like the War of the Worlds or something like that, you know, where it's really well done and really clever. And like you said, I mean, not everyone can make a movie like this. I'm sure many tried, but it was kind of a perfect storm of talent involved, and of course George Romero himself. So one thing I did want to touch on with this one, well, I should say this first. This movie not only kind of introduces us to the zombie or living dead like subgenre in a way, but it also kind of introduced all the character types, the archetypes that we'd see in these kinds of movies. Varying. There's obviously different spins on them, as we're going to get to, but you've got your kind of take charge leader, and you've got your kind of like panic survivor, and you've got the kind of greedy selfish person who's only kind of looking out for themselves and is kind of going to sabotage the team kind of character. I mean, there's people like that in every zombie movie, it feels like, and that's nothing new. But these characters here are all very iconic to me, and really well done. And I think this is something that always bothered me, but I've kind of forgotten about it. But I do really appreciate it. I think it's a really interesting choice, and maybe this is just how I'm interpreting it. But I think it's a really interesting choice from George Romero, and I guess maybe John Russo, who helped write it. That Ben, the hero who is brave and is fighting to protect everyone and to survive and is being a good leader. Ultimately, his plan kind of, spoiler alert, kind of fails, and everyone dies. Whereas Cooper's plan, the antagonist, who's a total pain in the ass and a coward, kind of turns out to have been the right way to go.
Right. There's definitely an irony there, But the hero's plan would have failed all along.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's I'm sure it's an intentional choice. It's just very unique. You didn't see stuff like that, certainly not in 1968. So again, there's levels to this movie. It's a movie that can really be picked apart. It's something that you can really take a lot out of it. But I think just even on the surface, the reason it's so successful is something that you said. I mean, first and foremost, it's just a really well-made, entertaining horror movie. And all the messages and all the other things you can kind of analyze and take out of it, like that's just icing on the cake. So, obviously this is a big one. This is one I'm sure everyone who's listening to this has seen, a dozen times. But I will just say that it is a movie that deserves its iconic status and its reputation, for sure.
Yeah, certainly. It has It is. It is Night of the Living Dead for a reason, and it spawned a series of films. And because Romero had a lot to say in '68, and then 10 years later, he's like, you know what? I still have something to say. And so this movie was made. Here is the radio spot for it.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill.
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all times. Dawn of the Dead.
This situation must be controlled before it's too late. They are multiplying too rapidly.
Night of the Living Dead has ended. Dawn of the Dead is here.
Not that room! Not that room!
They must be destroyed on sight.
Dawn of the Dead. This picture contains scenes of violence that may be considered shocking. No one under 17 will be admitted. Dawn of the Dead. From United Film Distributing Company.
The corpses of the recently dead are returning to life and attacking the living, devouring their victims. In the big cities, there is nowhere to hide. When two members of a Philadelphia SWAT unit decide to escape the city with two friends, the four take flight in a traffic helicopter. However, when the gas starts to run low, they must land on the roof of a mall now occupied by the living dead. Armed with weapons, the four humans manage to secure the mall through a series of brutal battles with the living dead creatures. Will the besieged four escape the bandits and the grisly flesh-eating zombies? Dawn of the Dead, a horror classic. Okay, that's the Thorn EMI, the iconic Thorn EMI VHS box for Dawn of the Dead. A movie that, boy, I love. That Thorn EMI VHS landed in video stores in 1983, a few years after this movie came out in theaters. It came out in April of 1979. A little too young to go see it. This was a movie not meant for little children, for sure. Although I was taken to some pretty crazy movies. I don't remember seeing this one in the theater, but if I did see it in the theater, I'm sure I would have been, what is happening? This movie is intense. I first saw it on that Thorn EMI VHS tape, renting that at the video store as a little kid. But not old enough to be able to take a zombie. But it scared the shit out of me. It really did. It really scared me. Something about the zombie effects in this movie really, really frightened me. Like, I remember seeing the scene. I don't know why this scene pops out in my head, but the silly scene in the movie where the guy has to take his blood pressure in that blood pressure cuff thing. Like he just can't resist it. And he goes back, and of course, like while he's trapped in it, a zombie like chomps into him. Like, that scared me so much for some reason.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Like anytime I see one of those things, I think about that scene and like just.
Oh my god, that's great.
Totally frightened of them.
You just picture that arm that was left in there. Yeah.
Yeah, it just it did something to me. I love malls so much in movies. And
yes.
This is like the king of mall movies, and just having the idea of escaping to a place filled with all the things you might want is, of course, a genius stroke on George Romero's part. He learned of a mall that was opening or that had opened, and this is like a new thing, of course, in culture of that time period, and he, it's like he saw potential there for a film, and he ran with it. He ran with it. He knew this was going to be a statement on the 70s, and of course, much has been said about this movie being a statement on consumerism and where American culture was going with that, of course, and it's so clear in the movie, that theme, but it's such an epic at the same time. It really is an adventure movie as well as it is a horror movie, and a movie about a small band of people trying to survive in a world gone completely mad, just trying to make some sense out of it. And it's something, my wife and I talk about all the time. Like, my wife is really into like zombies, and she has like a zombie apocalypse escape plan, and she often talks about the plan in this movie and how it could have worked. And she's huge. She's huge on Dawn of the Dead, and she loves it. It's one of her favorite movies. It's one of her all-time favorite movies, and I understand why. It's like, you know, that culture we grew up in the 80s with malls and it was so comforting to us as kids, and then mixing it with the idea of like things coming to get you, whether they be dead or alive. In this case, like a biker gang led by Tom Savini, and trying to take, you know, what they want as well, take a piece of the action. And you know, this is when Romero was starting to comment. You know, he was saying it in the first film, where how, you know, the real horror is people turning on each other. Right, with the characters in that movie, and then of course it expands on it in this movie, where it's literally a war between the bikers and this crew, this 4-man crew, and I just love that and where that goes, and just the many scenes of them trying to set up their life there and to take out the zombies, and it's just so fun to watch. And of course all the zombies themselves and the makeups, which are, you know, sometimes great and sometimes like clearly obviously makeup, but it was, you know, it was before they really got improved in later installments of the series, and I think they're great, though. I still think they're great, and I still think they really pop out to me, even though I'm an adult now, I'm not quite as scared of what's happening to me on the screen. I just think I still kind of like wince a bit, you know, certain chomps and certain scenes and of body parts, and George Romero did that so well. You really could get under your skin with some of that, and he makes a really fun movie out of zombies, but then again delivering a message, which is amazing. And I just love it to death. I've talked about this movie on the 1979 podcast. Right. So guys, go back to that one. So I'm here to hear your thoughts on the film.
Oh, sure. So yeah. All right. So Dawn of the Dead. If I'm honest, this is one I didn't really grow up a huge fan of. My brother liked this movie a lot. But, you know, I'm not sure if it was like this with you and your sister, but I think with siblings, sometimes you kind of are almost turned off by stuff that your siblings like a lot. Like you want to find your own things in a way. So maybe that was like a small part of that there. But I remember my brother was a big fan of this, and I'm sure he showed it to me at some point, you know. And there's like a 6 or 7 year age difference with us, so like he could appreciate things at a different level than I could, of course. And I think that maybe I was just too young to really appreciate this movie the first time I saw it. I liked it. I mean, there's a lot of things I liked about it, but it just wasn't one I was ever really drawn to, or that I really went back to a lot. It just was kind of a, you know, that 70s zombie movie in the mall. And I will say, well, you know, actually, no, I'm not going to go to that yet. There's something I want to say about where the movie kind of loses me, and still lost me this time, unfortunately. But there's a lot of good things to say about it first. So I will say there's several cuts out there, obviously, of Dawn of the Dead. I think that's sort of well documented. And for this viewing, I actually, just like old times, I watched this one with my brother, and we watched the Euro cut.
Interesting.
Which is the Dario Argento cut. So we're both, you know, big Dario Argento fans, you know, just like we're George Romero fans, and I think that might have helped the experience a little bit, because there was, you know, for anyone who's not as familiar with Dario Argento, most of his movies are scored by Goblin, who's a great band. Their tracks are just amazing. I've actually seen them in concert before, and so they do the soundtrack for this cut, which is great. So I kind of love that. Now think it might have been a mistake to watch an alternate cut of a movie I hadn't seen for a really long time, because I can't, I honestly don't know what, some of the differences are between them. The running time was a little shorter in this cut. One thing that I did notice just from memory was I did not see the scene where the zombie got the top of his head chopped off by the helicopter propeller, which is a really random thing to take out. So I don't know if I just missed that somehow this viewing, but it's kind of hard to miss. So I don't know. And, a funny side story I should mention is I actually got that zombie's autograph from my brother once. He was sitting by himself at a convention, and I felt sort of bad. He was just looking to, make conversation. And I what was I going to say? I haven't seen Dawn of the Dead forever. I kind of remember that scene, but I'm not a huge fan. So I was like, yeah, I just kind of got caught making conversation with him. And I was like, oh, what the hell? I'll get his autograph from my brother. He'll be happy. So he actually had a fun little diagram kind of showing how the effect was done with drawings.
That's awesome.
And, he was just he was so cool, with just being the person, that person, that zombie. So that's another thing with these movies, I should say, and it goes back to the original Night of the Living Dead, is a lot of these zombies kind of became horror icons, which is, obviously that's not an example of one that's a horror icon, but we can get to some later on, but I think that's pretty cool. Just for the way they died or the way they looked or something, they kind of became iconic, and that's really cool. So so again, this cut it had a little bit more of an Italian horror vibe, which maybe that just kind of added a little flavor for me. And and again, I'm much older now. Watching this, I feel like my tastes have obviously changed a lot over the years. There's a lot of things I didn't really appreciate before when I was in my teens or 20s, that now that I'm, getting closer to 40, find myself really into. So, this is one that I think aged really well for me. I definitely appreciated a lot more this viewing. Now, I will say I sort of disagree. So I should say this. I think the same problems I kind of always had with this one, I had again. And I sort of disagree about the zombie effects for me, because I think it'd be different if I'd seen this back then, but seeing it kind of as a more modern horror fan at whatever time I saw this, that's obviously changed what's a modern horror, but they just kind of seem like they were just painted blue, a lot of them. And it works, and another thing, you didn't get as much of this in Night of the Living Dead just because of the setting, but you get a lot of it here, and from here on out in all the other movies. I kind of love how there's just randomly a zombie wearing a football uniform or something like that, because it's what was this, how did this outbreak happen? What was society doing while this was happening? Where it got to this point. So I get such a kick out of that. You see cheerleaders and stuff like that pop up, and there's definitely a lot more of that here. You get, I think there's a clown zombie in one of these. Oh god, I think that was.
Yeah, at least two of the movies is a clown zombie. Yep,
which is hilarious. Oh right, yeah, that's right. There is in two of them. I just remembered another one. So yeah, I don't know. It's great. I do get a kick out of that stuff. But again, if I'm gonna talk about the things that kind of bug me, that's not a huge thing, because again, it's just of its time. But one thing that does bug me and bugged me again this viewing, I was almost hoping that Argento had done something to change that, is the introduction of the bikers. And I totally get, and look, I love Tom Savini. I'm a huge Tom Savini fan, so seeing him show up is a lot of fun, in any movie. But even though I understand the role they play and kind of making this plan fall apart and just, kind of just destroying everything they'd worked so hard to secure, once they start like throwing like pies in the zombies' faces and stuff like that, like it's again, like it's of its time. I get it. It's just like it just kind of, I just wish they'd kind of done it a little differently for me. But you know, I totally get why people still love that, and I totally get why you love that, obviously. So it's just something that bugged me when I was a teenager, maybe, and I took these movies too seriously. And even now that I don't take them that seriously, it still kind of just bugged me that I was like, these guys again, like they're just as obnoxious as I remembered. And maybe that's what we're supposed to feel. So I don't know, but that definitely does bug me. You know what? I think that's probably a good sign with the movie too, where you get a little bit pissed off when people like undo like something good that other people work so hard for. Like it's like, this is, and again, like just like Night of the Living Dead sort of kicked off a subgenre, like this kicked off like the mall horror like subgenre in a way, so like that kind of stuff, so it's just, I don't know, it's a good one for sure. And I will say I love Ken Foree. I'm a big fan of him. I think he's great in this movie. I think he's great in everything, honestly. He shows up, I guess, later, if we're going to touch on some of these other spin-offs and remakes and stuff like that. Like, he gets to show up in the series again in a way, which is cool. But I could have spent a lot more time with that character. I liked him a lot. And I don't know. I'm just a big fan of him. Again, I love Stuart Gordon, and I think he's great in From Beyond. And I don't know, he's just awesome. He's a really cool actor. I wish he'd done more things even. But yeah, he's great in this, and I think that oh, and gosh, I almost forgot, but the girl who's in Mad Men, I'm blanking on her name.
Galen Ross.
Yes, exactly. Like I kind of forgot. I don't know why. Like I had like kind of a different memory of her in this movie, but I found everybody like really likable, and the helicopter pilot, I didn't really remember being anything special, and all these guys, or even Ken Foree's buddy, his SWAT buddy, but they were all kind of like likable, like good characters, and you were rooting for them. There was really nice little touches. Like, I don't know if it's in every cut, but I love that like Ken Foree like sets up like a little like romantic dinner for Flyboy and Caitlin Ross, and I love that at that point they're getting like dressed up in all that clothes at the mall and stuff like that. Right. So I don't know. It's, again, there's a lot I like about this movie. I like the maybe you can tell me, does the theatrical cut open up with the TV studio as well, like kind of the chaos there?
Yeah, the TV studio stuff. Yeah, that's
okay, great, because I couldn't remember that. I remembered the SWAT raid and all the stuff that happens there like right after, but the TV studio stuff I got a kick out of, even seeing George Romero and stuff like that there. So and I think the other shots kind of stuff that was going on TV throughout the movie, I don't know, it's really entertaining. So again, it's a really good movie. I like it a lot. It's just not, it's not one of my favorites, and it's strange because it's, this was 1978. So if you think about it, that's a pretty big year for horror. And for whatever reason, I never really realized that before. So I don't know. I definitely have a newfound appreciation for it.
Yeah, it was 78, but it came out in theaters in 79.
Did it?
Yeah,
okay.
It came out I think it premiered in April of 79 in New York City. That's where it first opened, at least for me. In my neck of the woods. I love this movie so much. It's my favorite of all the movies. I'm gonna go out and say that. I love the cast. They're my favorite characters too. This band of four people really. It's just David MG, Scott Rainier, Galen Ross, and Ken Faree. I mean, they're so great. I love that bond that they have with each other, and when it takes the turns it does, you really feel for them. When Scott Rainier turns, and that I think the makeup is really good there.
It is. Yeah. There's definitely some really strong ones, and that's one of them.
Yeah, you really feel for that character, and of course his relationship with Ken Faree, and just they had such a rapport with each other, and and the other characters and how they bond with each other. Flyboy is a cool character. Galen Ross, she's like this character who you think is going to be the Barbara of the first movie, who kind of is shell-shocked or suffering from PTSD.
Right.
And then you realize that it's really about her coming into her own by the end of the movie. And Absolutely. She kind of takes over the movie at some point, which I think is really clever of George Romero. I feel like that's not often said, that it really becomes her movie by the end of the movie. And her and Ken Faree, really. And I love that. I really do love that, where it goes. I want to kind of follow those characters on their journey.
I felt like I kind of wanted like a continuation, like a direct continuation. I was thinking the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it, I'd completely forgotten she's, her character is pregnant in this movie too, which is a choice.
That's a pretty big concern for her, yeah.
Yeah.
I love where that goes. I don't know, I really have a strong bond with this movie. I watched the Argento cut once. I know Argento has a big force in this movie getting made in general. He's the one that invited Romero out to Italy, and that's where Romero wrote the script for this film. While at Dario's, and so cool. It's really cool that that Argento had such respect for Romero, a fellow filmmaker, which you feel like in Hollywood a lot of filmmakers just are kind of like would stab each other in the back if they could, right? Or just at least producers in Hollywood certainly would do that. You see the camaraderie, like he had such respect for what George Romero did with the first film, that he wanted to work with him and wanted him to make another movie, and
which is so cool.
And that's what he did. And eventually, it was released, like I said, April of 1979 from United Film Distribution Company, and it only cost $650,000. This movie, and I'm sure it made much more than that. Again, the box office receipts weren't really properly tallied for this film, but I'm sure it did pretty well. I'm a big fan. I like Michael Gornick was a DP, and he would work with Romero for a while after this. That alternate track for the Goblin music, I do like the Goblin music, but I much more prefer the library music for this film. I think that's more my jam.
For some reason at the moment, but maybe we'll hear it in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. What an iconic line.
I totally I cut you off in a great line, but I was just going to say I do love that scene where he's talking about that saying, and that it's just, again, there's a lot of really good stuff in here, and I think it's a good one to be your favorite of the original night to day trilogy. I respect that for sure.
Let's get into the next one then before we
I was about to say.
we start any trouble. All right, here is the TV spot for the next film.
Day of the Dead.
They have overrun us, Something like 400,000 to 1 by my calculations.
Day of the Dead.
It could be years before we know exactly what we're dealing with here.
Day of the Dead.
Throw some blind thinking there.
The darkest day of horror the world has ever known. George A. Romero's Day of the Dead.
Due to scenes of violence, no one under 17 admitted.
Starts Friday at a theater or drive-in near you. Check newspapers for showtimes.
A nightmarish, flesh-eating army of walking corpses rules the earth. For the last living humans, a fate worse than death is a terrifying reality in this horror cult classic from George A. Romero. Fortified in a vast underground bunker, a small band of scientists conducts grotesque experiments on captured ghouls in a desperate attempt to domesticate the creatures. But the brutal military men who share the scientists' refuge don't want the zombies controlled. They want them destroyed. When the soldiers discover that their own officers have been used in the grisly experiments, they overpower the scientists and throw them into the cages housing the ravenous living dead. Will anyone make it out alive? It's a special effects tour de force as the beleaguered remnants of the human race face the Day of the Dead. And that is, again, from the Media Home Entertainment VHS, describing George A. Romero's Day of the Dead, in case you didn't figure it out yet. So Day of the Dead is a movie that I remember was sort of sold to me as the weak link of the original trilogy. Well, I guess at the time it was the trilogy. There weren't any movies after this at the time I saw it. So, interestingly enough, and I guess this is just to kind of get into my opinion of the movie right away, this has always been my favorite of the three. And I don't know if that has to do with maybe me seeing this earlier, or just the fact that it was undersold to me. But I think it's pretty brilliant. And I was really happy to see that, Romero himself has cited this as his favorite of the Living Dead movies. So I feel like Day of the Dead is a movie that deserves a little more love. And watching it now for the podcast, I actually I have a few different releases of this one. I just like randomly chose one that I don't think I'd watched yet. I had like the Umbrella Blu-ray, which looks great. I mean, it looks the transfer was terrific. This is a movie that I wouldn't say like all classic horror movies stand up to the kind of detail as far as effects go that you see in high definition, but this really is like how was it just described without saying it's a special effects extravaganza, for lack of a better term. Like, this is up there with something like John Carpenter's The Thing, my favorite movie of all time. So the effects are just amazing, and watching it in HD, which I don't know if I'd done before, because most of my releases of this are DVDs, but it stood up really well. Like, there was no point where I thought, this looks a little weak or this looks a little silly. If anything, it was like, this is disgusting, And my poor wife even kind of toughed it out through some of it. And at first she was just like so turned off by the gore. But I kept telling her, this is one of my favorites. And she got really into it. And she watched it until she, it just got too late for her, because we just have kind of different body clocks. But yeah, like it even won her over. And cool. I think it's just the character dynamics, the tension that's built in this bunker between the scientists and the military. And I think the performances are all great. The characters are all great. Watching it this time of year was kind of fun, because I never really noticed that it takes place in, late October, around Halloween, around the Day of the Dead, however you want to look at that. As shown by the calendars throughout the movie. One on the very iconic hands through a certain wall kind of dream sequence, but then that same calendar is seen again later in a room, and then another at the very end you see a new calendar that a survivor is kind of drawing out, a few days into November. which is really cool too. So it was just kind of by coincidence turned out to be the perfect time to watch one of my favorite movies. So yeah, God, I mean, the cast again is great. I really love Laurie Cardile. I'm not sure how to say Cardille. Sure, I'm sure I said it wrong. A guy who gets his name butchered every day can't get anyone else's name right, of course. So I really love her as like kind of the lead, Sarah. I've always loved the helicopter pilot played by Terry Alexander, John. And honestly, again, it's a small cast of characters, but I think they're all really good. Like Joseph Pilato as Rhodes is great. He's fantastic. And you know what? Not to jump around, because again, I definitely do plenty of that. But this is another instance where I would say the character that's kind of played to be the asshole and the the antagonist among the human survivors, in this case Rhodes, like I found myself agreeing with him again, like kind of like with Cooper, where he had a right to be pissed off. Not the way he acted, of course, the guy's an asshole and did a lot of things wrong, but the way that the other soldiers' bodies were being used, and the fact that they were just dwindling down in numbers for these sick experiments, I kind of get where he was coming from in a way. But again, the bad thing about that is when it kind of turns into, Lord of the Flies or however you want to look at it, and people trying to take control and things breaking down into chaos. It's, if you don't have the right kind of people in those roles, things are going to go to shit really fast. And unfortunately, he is not the right person to be in charge. I do think it's interesting that like we don't get to see his predecessor who just passed away. But it kind of makes you wonder like how much things change, because I think they do a good job establishing that, that he's a very different presence, and it changes the dynamics in the facility. So, so again, I'm a huge fan of this movie. I have to mention one of my favorite zombies of all time, of course, Bub, who is very iconic. One of those iconic zombies I mentioned before. I think he is sort of the star of the movie in a way. He kind of steals the show. And anyone who has seen this knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, I can kind of go on and on about this one. It's just a great movie, filled with great characters and great performances, and you really get a lot of that tension that you got from Night of the Living Dead, but it's sort of on a different scale here. And the effects are just there to kind of top it off and take it to a whole other level this time. I think it's like night and day, literally like night and day, and like kind of seeing what Tom Savini, how far effects have come in general at this point. It's just a sight to behold and appreciate. And it's just so impressive. So, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of jumping all over the place. So before I go off on too many tangents, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
No, I love tangents. Give me tangents. Now, this one I saw in the theater.
Oh, cool.
This is the first of the films I saw in the theater. I saw this at the United Artists Twin in Times Square along with Life Force. That was an interesting day. It's a pretty crazy movie, again, for a kid. I think it was 10. Played the summer of 85 in New York. And it was, I don't know, I thought it was crazy, and it was like, definitely the gore was so disgusting.
Yeah.
But I was bored in between all the gore stuff. I was like, the people talking. There's a lot of people talking in this movie. This is a very talky movie. And I was just I was bored as a kid with this movie. And watching it on home video, watching it on the media home entertainment throughout the years as a kid, I kind of just looked at it that way. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of talking in this movie. And a lot of yelling, especially when the Rhodes character shows up. And so it's like military yelling, scientists yelling back, fighting over, like, what should we do? We're making the right choices. I don't know. It wasn't for me as a kid, honestly. I respected that other people were really into it. I had friends who loved this movie. And we're like all about Day of the Dead because of the zombie effects and the makeup effects and Bub and how cool it was that Romero was just doing this crazy zombie movie in the 80s, right? And so it took me a while to really get to this one, like appreciate it. I saw it on DVD and liked it on DVD, but still was not quite that warm to it. I appreciated it. I thought the effects when I watched it on DVD were even better than I had seen on VHS. Like I could see them more, and the detail was there. And I'm like, wow, this is like definitely a big improvement of effects and what has come before this, and what they could do with zombies and all that gross stuff, of course. But I still had a problem with the characters. Like I could not completely relate to them. And I liked the lead. I liked the Laurie Cadill character a lot. I thought she was a calming presence in a movie where nothing is calm.
Well, of course, the one woman, stuck in this lab with all these crazy men. So
she was definitely calming. Terry Alexander's character was calming, though his accent was questionable. I like he's from the islands. Like, was he? Something about it was like, something about the accent like threw me off. Like I wasn't quite buying it for some reason, but I liked him. I definitely liked him. And I liked the Bub character. I thought he was cool as a zombie. I like what George Romero was doing with him. This is all like this is what I thought of him at the time, and then the Joe Pilato character. Yeah. Well, the army guys in general were like, disgusting and obnoxious. Oh yeah, and kind of doing the same things you were annoyed by the biker gang in Dawn of the Dead, but doing that here like in a very in your face, loud, obnoxious way because the focus was on them greater in this movie than there was the biker gang in Dawn of the Dead, and then Joe Pilato's Rhodes character shows up and he's like even louder than everybody else. And he's just screaming, and he's a horrible person. And I don't know. I was like, I am not into this character. I know he's well loved too. So that was like another character that, like, oh man, that Rhodes guy is so messed up. I remember those conversations with my friends, and
not everyone gets to tell zombies to like choke on his intestines while they're eating.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. He's like, choke on them. Choke on. So a lot of interesting choices there with that character. For
Definitely
sure.
Some interesting actorial choices with his, especially coming from him. So I'm not sure how much Romero was directing him, or Joe Pilato seemed to have been directing himself. And then watching, so I understood like what Romero was saying, like in subsequent viewings and watching this movie throughout the years, like what he was trying to say about how men, how people turn on each other. That's the real horror here. And meanwhile, at the same time, while people are turning on each other, there's a zombie here who's like, he's like showing evolution, right? There's an evolutionary process happening at the same time, right? The zombies becoming more human, while the humans are actually turning on each other. And it was kind of it's really interesting what he was trying to say, what he was saying with the film, but I wanted like more. I wanted them to get out of the bunker. I wanted them, I wanted scenes of them getting to the islands and the islandsman and. and you get that at the very end of the movie. It just takes a long time to get there, and there's a lot of scenes in the bunker.
No, it's very, I mean, that's, you're stuck in that bunker, and if you're not into it, like I loved it. It felt like a great environment for like a horror movie or a video game even, or something like that. I was really into, and the movie again, like I think this was more of an action movie even in a lot of ways. So like having those kinds of military characters and stuff like that, like that's totally, it's in my, comfort zone. But like, I can 100% see where you're coming from. Like if that's not your thing, for sure.
Yeah, it was just, I guess a lot for me, like a lot of, what would actually happen in that situation, where I wanted a little more of the fantasy element. I wanted something a little more soothing and calming, where it was, obviously not going to get that in a zombie movie. So I don't know why I was looking for that.
No, you could have got like a shopping scene, Yeah,
I wanted a shopping montage. Yeah. I missed the shopping montages. I need a shopping montage. Money, like. The money is definitely, in this point out from the series, like money is definitely an interesting factor in these movies. Where this one, it's not, it's worthless, right? But then it changes a bit as it's coming up. I like the stuff in Florida. That's cool. There was definitely cool stuff about it. And then I watched it last night or the other night before, and everything changed.
Oh, really?
Everything changed. Now I'm watching this movie in 2020, it's like nearly election day. So much has happened this year. So much crazy fucked up shit has happened this year, and will probably continue to happen, unfortunately, after this podcast airs. That I'm like, whoa, this movie is like now, really, it's pretty much now. This is what's happening. Like, we're turning on each other. We're doing all this misinformation. It's like there's a struggle between man and military and science. It's right. Romero was saying it right there. Like, we're having that struggle right now. We're not trusting the science. We're not giving science a chance. We want to just fucking take what we want and get out of here and do whatever we want. So there's a struggle. It's happening. And Romero prophesized it, and he often did in his movies too. So he's really smart. I was into it. I was really into what he was doing with this movie, and it shows its budget constraints by setting it all in the bunker, which is what I had a problem with in this movie for years. But I'm like, you know what? That's okay. It's there's a budget constraints in all these films. Like in Night of the Living Dead, it's all set in the farmhouse, right?
Yeah, all three of these are set kind of in one location.
Yeah, and he's keeping it tight. Yeah. He's keeping it tight because he has to with budget, but he's making the most out of his story by that. I still think some of the performances of the military guys are a little too much. That hasn't. That's a bit.
In particular,
there's a bit. It's a bit much, and even Joe. It could have been reined in more. It really could have been a little more subtle. But look at what's going on in the world. Like, these guys are not subtle. They're just.
Suddenly they don't seem as unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, this is real life. It's crazy. The effects are so good in this movie. I mean, the makeup effects are like. Out of this world. And I mean, you can't. Yeah, if you're looking, I don't think they get better in zombie movies in this movie, honestly. And this was like 35 years ago. I'm sure there've been improvements, but a lot of things are aided now by digital effects, right? So
I sort of feel like this, and I might even give this the edge over Return of the Living Dead, which is such a crazy set piece for effects. I think I would give this the edge. It's just, this is something else. Like the stuff you see, even like the face is missing and the tongue hanging out and all that other like the cool looking zombie stuff we get in this. Like this is like you can like teach a makeup effects program just based on this movie. I feel like for Hollywood, it's something else.
And
for
watching
sure.
all these extra features, and that's basically what happened. They invited people to like basically watch what they were doing, and people were helping. Because they had so much work to do in this small budgeted film with all these zombies, and they had a lot of people come and help and just learn from the process, learn from these Savini and the burgeoning K and B, and so yeah, there's a lot that's come out from this film. You could say, I mean, the effects have really became an industry. And you could trace it back probably to this film, and that's really cool. That's very cool.
I think it's cool that we both kind of found new appreciation for some of the movies that we weren't as into originally, because I do think it's a pretty strong series, through and through, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, as a trilogy, it's pretty excellent. I love the Bub character. I think what he was doing with that is really cool. I think he's he gives the best performance. I mean, Sherman Howard gives the best performance of the film. How difficult of a character is that, really, to be a zombie, to be someone who's dead, comes back to life, has to process all this information, but has no real, it's just so good. He just gives such a good performance. And,
for sure.
Again,
I think he's great.
And another character who I would like to follow again, because his character, presumably survives or as a zombie, and you don't see him again. So it's like you would, kind of want to follow that character too. That's a good sign when you want to see more of something. That's like the movie's doing its job when you're like, okay, I want more of that. Again, some things don't quite work as well as the other films to me, but the things that are right are really, really, really good. And I can see why Romero himself is a big fan of this film. So
sure, and I can, and I should say again, obviously, like I mentioned before, I think in general, this probably the consensus is that this is the weakest of the three. So I don't think you're off base at all, where you're coming from. I'm just saying, for whatever reason, this is this one really does it for me.
I wonder if that stemmed because it was like a $3.5 million budget movie and it only made $5 million at the box office. So there's perception that it was not a hit. It wasn't really a hit.
Kind of seen as a failure.
Yeah, I think that is often what dilutes a movie. Doesn't.
So many movies from this era just weren't financial successes or critical successes at that time.
Yeah, and a lot of that's because there were so many movies coming out at the same time, and the '85 was such a onslaught of movies, so things got lost in the shuffle, and this was a movie that was released unrated, so it was never going to be a big hit because it wasn't properly advertised, because it couldn't be. There was only a certain theaters can advertise, certain newspapers would advertise it, but not everything. So
what a time, right? I mean, it's hard to kind of process that now.
I know
things are, but it's great. We didn't even mention Dr. Frankenstein. Richard Libert. Is it Liberty? I blanked for a second.
Yeah.
But he's I mean, talk about another kind of memorable eccentric character. That's I mean, gosh, that's where I think the unfortunately the pro science argument falls apart in this movie, where he might not be the best example.
You could definitely see where he is crazy, but also onto something.
No, it's just exactly. He's brilliant and he's onto something, but then his methods and using it's so insensitive to be using these people who just died and these soldiers, and then don't they find a tape recorder where he's talking to his mom or something? He's so they turns out he's kind of crazy too, and I don't know. I love it.
Crazy but lovable.
Yeah, exactly. I love all of it, and like you said, I kind of do love all that distrust and these seemingly really over the top characters that sadly do seem very much, plausible. in 2020, hindsight. So, those two soldiers in particular that are kind of like Rhodes's muscle, and one more than the other. One's like the muscle, the other one's just kind of the annoying, laughing, jerk or whatever.
Yeah, great phrases, and you definitely get a sense of personality from these people.
I was just about to say,
definitely.
It just seems really well cast. Like maybe, like you said, like so maybe some of the accents and other stuff or whatever. But like, I just feel like everyone in this movie, to me, like feels authentic. I don't know, so I'm really into it.
Shout out to John Amplis from Martin showing up in the cast as a scientist.
Yeah.
All right. So that was Day of the Dead. Let's the trilogy, the long-time trilogy. Let's see, how many years was it a trilogy? It was a trilogy for 20 years, and then
interesting. You had 10 years between the first two, and then you had that I guess like 6-year gap. And then, like you said, 20 years until he went back to
20 years, because I think he had problems getting movies made for a long time. That was a big issue with Romero. He got some films made after this, like Monkey Shines and
Two Evil
Eyes and The Dark Half. But he had a hard time getting a zombie movie off the ground. His plan was to make one every 10 years. So the 90s did not see a zombie movie, so we had to get to the mid-2000s with this one. Here is a quick teaser spot for it.
6 billion people on Earth, most of them dead. This summer, mankind's final battle begins. George A. Romero's Land of the Dead. Rated R. Starts June 24th.
Legendary filmmaker George A. Romero returns to unleash another chapter in his zombie series. In this new tale of terror, Romero creates a harrowing vision of a modern-day world where the walking dead roam a vast, uninhabited wasteland, and the living try to lead normal lives behind the high walls of a fortified city. A new security has been built by a band of ruthless opportunists who live in a luxury in the towers of a skyscraper, high above the less fortunate citizens who must eke out a hard life on the streets below. With the survival of the city at stake, a group of mercenaries is called into action to protect the living from the evolving army of the dead waiting outside the city walls. Land of the Dead features a cast of great actors including Dennis Hopper, Simon Baker, Ozzy Argento, Robert Joy, and John Leguizamo. Okay, that's from the Scream Factory Collector's Edition. Thankfully, you sent that my way so I could read that out. I have the Universal edition. I forgot to order the Scream Factory edition. Silly me. But it's on the way to me. And so Land of the Dead came out in the summer of 2005. This was 20 years again later, which is crazy to think that it took 20 years for Romero to get a zombie movie made, considering he made 3 of the great zombie movies of all time.
Right, yeah.
So finally, studio, this time Universal, decided to greenlight a movie, a Romero zombie movie. And he made the movie he wanted to make under the studio guidelines. You know, they wanted a certain thing, but he wanted a certain thing. So this is a meld of that. It looked like he got his vision across from watching this movie. It feels like a very much a Romero zombie movie, but also big old-fashioned entertainment. Starts right away with the old Universal logo. Clearly a loving homage to horror of the past, and with the old Universal logo. And now Romero gets to work in the Universal toolbox and workshed, if you will, by having his little movie. You know, it was a modestly budgeted film made for a cost of about $15 million for its scope. You would think it would cost even a lot more while watching this movie. There's a lot going on in it. There's a lot of action in it. I liked this movie when it came out in 2005. I'm like, wow, this is... I was expecting I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting 20 years after a trilogy. I'm like, why is he making another movie? Why does it take? I kind of understood why it took so long, because he just had troubles making getting movies made. But I'm like, maybe it's a little too long, right? To wait in between zombie movies. Maybe it kind of lost his way. And so I was a little skeptical going into the theater to see this one, and did see this in the theater, which was cool. But I found myself entertained all the way through, from beginning to end, and kind of with it what it was trying to say about man and society, and how the rich are at a certain level and everyone else is at another level. And yep, that was something that rang true in 2005, and boy does it ever in 2020. You can really draw some really clear parallels to our days right now with this film. So again, Romero ahead of the curve, but it was happening then. It had been happening in our culture for a long time. Clearly, the rich were dominating, and everyone else was kind of suffering. This has been around a while. It happened throughout the 80s with the Reagan era. I mean, we were paying a big price for other people to live very comfortably, and boy, do we feel it now. I was very entertained by this movie and seeing it, and so I had a very positive response to it. I watched it again on DVD. And then the Blu-ray came out from Universal, and I watched it on Blu-ray and enjoyed it. I think I watched that with my wife when we were pretty early on in when we were dating, and we both enjoyed it. And rewatching it recently, it really holds up. I mean, like I said, it really holds up because of what he was trying to say with his themes, but also because of entertainment. It's big and bold. It moves really quickly, and there's a lot going on, but it's never boring. It's the characters are interesting enough when you follow them. I'm a big fan of the actors. I think the actors all do a great job. They're all doing bringing their A game. I think John Leguizamo, who I sort of liked when I first saw it, but now I really appreciate that character more. I think that character, there's a lot going on with that character, and he's a very complicated character. And I really like that on this viewing. And I thought Simon Baker was a good lead. Maybe not an obvious choice for this movie, but I thought he was good. And the team that's assembled is really good. Like Robert Joy is like his sidekick. I love Robert Joy as an actor. Anytime he shows up in something, he's always really good. And here he's really good as a sidekick here, and with a little bit of a backstory of his own. Ozzy Argento, of course, joining the team in a kind of a way that reminded me of watching like a. This viewing kind of reminded me of watching a John Carpenter movie. I felt like I was watching like an Escape from New York kind of movie. That's what it felt like. I was watching like Snake is like rescuing like someone, and then they join the team, and I kind of got that vibe in this viewing. That was kind of cool.
No, I never thought of that before, but there's definitely some.
Yeah, it is that vibes in there. It's a post-apocalyptic movie. This is like when the series becomes a real post-apocalyptic kind of thing.
Proper post-apocalyptic. Yeah, society sort of rebuilt itself in a microcosm in a way, right?
Exactly. So I was kind of getting that Carpenter-ish vibe, but because it's an action-ish movie, and the way that it's centered around the Dead Reckoning, which is this vehicle that's unstoppable. And
it's such a cool concept.
Yeah, it's a cool concept. It's a MacGuffin. It's all these things. And one, so I like that. Maybe the movie should have been called Dead Reckoning, which was the original title of the film, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that was discussed,
Yeah. There was a lot of elements in this movie I really liked. So it came together, and of course having Dennis Hopper as this guy who's running this Fiddler's Green show. And I love the irony of Dennis Hopper, this countercultural hero or icon
exactly.
playing
Easy Rider.
Yeah, so that's like a fun, fun ironic casting, and
great
and I think
cast.
and Dennis Hopper seems really game, and he looks like he's having fun with the role, and
absolutely.
And then of course we're following around a zombie character. In this case, Eugene Clark as Big Daddy.
Yes.
This gas station person who's kind of leading a revolt of the zombies, and there's a cool little evolution there of the zombies, and you get to trace that and where that goes. So yeah, I'm a big fan. The only thing I'm turned off to in this movie, and you know what I'm going to say, when the movie uses CGI to enhance like the effects, and I understand why they're doing that, and I totally get it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, well, a lot of things in there could have been practical. Like they were doing things back in the 80s, that were very inventive, and that could have been done on the set that day. But they were resorting to using a green screen and then filling in the blank later, as they do in every movie these days, seemingly.
Right.
So that was kind of the beginning of that. To me, the beginning of the end, if you will. But I forgave it because it was a mix of practical and CGI, and Romero was trying to do the practical where he could.
There was some great practical effects in this for sure. Yeah.
But I think it just for some reason the effects when they do show up are just. They definitely stand out as effects, because they're now 15-year-old effects, so they're like, oh yeah, that stands out more. I'll forgive it. It's an entertaining movie, and I'm definitely with it. What about you?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, there's so many things you just said that I love to touch on, but it's as far as the effects, I think at the time CGI bothered me a lot more, and I feel like now I just kind of see it as of that time. And it's unfortunate that we've been kind of desensitized to
you're numb, man. You're numb to it.
Like we just kind of lost that battle, so now when there's some great practical effects and stuff, it's awesome. But like if you're gonna find enjoyment from like any movies like post 2002 or something, probably even earlier than that. Geez, you just have to take that bullet. You just have to be okay with CGI and at varying degrees of CGI. Sometimes incredibly unnecessary CGI, like another movie that's a remake of a movie in this series where every helicopter and stuff like that is very clearly CGI. And I don't know, stuff like that. Like I used to bother me a lot, and I could think of a lot of movies where that was like probably like even a deal breaker to me. I don't know if this was one of them necessarily, but I know that CGI bothered me for a long time, especially as a guy who's so into practical effects. So I see where you're coming from there, but sorry. So all of that aside, I just wanted to comment on that because you're right that is something that's an issue. But again, this movie was made in 2005, and you weren't going to get better than this as far as effects go, probably. So how do I say this? Like as far as Land of the Dead, like is it possible for a film to be like timely and like way ahead of its time, like at the same time? Because like this movie, it like perfectly captured like those like social politics, I guess, like for like I don't know what else to call it, of like the US, like post 9/11, I guess pretty much like through like the George W. Bush administration, like this just feels like the perfect movie to like capture that, like you could put it in a time capsule, and and at the same time, like you said, it also very much feels like it was saying things that were ahead of its time that we can kind of appreciate more now. So I don't know, it's something I didn't necessarily appreciate or acknowledge the first time I saw this, back in 2005 in theaters. I did see this in theaters. I guess this is the only one of the George Romero, Living Dead movies that I did see in theaters, of these four. And I don't believe the other ones even had theatrical releases, but so I did get to see this, but unfortunately I don't remember it leaving much of an impression. Like I don't know. I don't have a lot of memories of that. Like I just know that I saw it, and it's strange because there were zombie movies coming out around this time that I did really get into and bought on disc and rented or whatever. Like I got really into and watched a bunch of times, but I didn't really go back to this one for whatever reason. So fortunately, Scream Factory did put out that really nice collector's edition, which includes an unrated version. It's just a few minutes longer, which is the version I've watched a couple of times since. And this was one of those movies I was telling you off of the podcast, like this is one of those kind of random times I was at Best Buy and just saw like a Scream Factory release, which I wouldn't have necessarily like ordered on the Scream Factory website or Amazon or wherever, because there's so many titles to choose from. But when you see a movie like this kind of out in the wild, like you're kind of drawn to pick it up. So I bought it, and I wasn't expecting a lot. I just thought like, I'll give this another chance. And oh my God, like it's just aged so well to me. And again, maybe that's just saying, where I was at that time. Maybe I just didn't really, 2005, I was in my like early 20s still probably. So a lot of this stuff probably just went over my head. And watching it now, like I think it's brilliant and it's so much fun. Like on top of that, so I do love all the characters, like you said. I love like the actors that were cast in these roles. I think they're all great. I think that Dennis Hopper, like you said, is like he's like kind of perfect as this like sort of Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld kind of character. And he has like probably my favorite, like one of my favorite scenes ever. I was gonna say in this movie, but it's probably one of my favorite scenes ever, is when he kind of like kills one of his cronies, and then he gets a phone call and he realizes he didn't need to do that because he's just like panicking and trying to get out of this situation, and he's just I don't know, it's really funny. I can't do it justice. But his reaction when he kind of realizes like, I would have done something differently if I'd known that, is just great. But I don't know. This might be like controversial. I don't know if it is or not, but like I would put this like way up there for me. Like it's like pretty close to Day of the Dead as like my favorite, like in this series, which is not what I would expect at all from a movie that came out in 2005. But I'm a big fan. And I do like Big Daddy a lot too. I think he's like a fine successor, for lack of a better term, like to Bub. He kind of is continuing that thread in a way, here like 20 years later, since Romero didn't get to do it as he wanted to, but he's picking it up much later. But it does seem like kind of a natural way to go with that progression. So it's again, I love it. I think that's another one of my favorite zombies. Probably he's like up there with Bub and Tarman and whoever else. And gosh, I mean, I love that Asia Argento's in this. because of that relationship, especially with George Romero and Dario Argento. I think that's really cool that he got to cast his friends and collaborators, daughter who has had a great career in her own right in this movie, and I think she's really good in this. Like I've always I think I've always had like a little bit of a crush on her, but like something about her character in this movie, she just comes off as like really cool, and I wish she did more stuff like this. Because there's, I don't know, that's a whole other story. Some of the other movies and stuff.
This movie, like she comes off as a cool, almost near action. Like she comes, again, it's like a character has to come into her own. But she's kind of from the beginning. She's pretty cool. Like there's a movie she made where she plays like a hitman. It's called Bee Monkey. I don't know if you've seen that one, but I'm a big fan of that movie.
Yeah, I'm sure I have.
She's really good in that.
Watching like pretty much everything she was in. I don't remember though now, to be honest, but I'm sure I've seen that and probably liked it too. I remember actually, now that we're talking about it, she was in another movie with Dennis Hopper too, where he like kept her in a cage or something random like that. But yeah, I don't know, weird stuff from that era, but. Of course, she was in a lot of her dad's movies too, and the thing with some of these great directors, and this is another reason why I think I like this movie so much, is like George Romero's fall off, because everyone had like a little bit of a fall off as they got into their older years, or still some of them are still making movies in these years, like, but like he was still like, the fact that he was able to put this out in 2005, where some of the other iconic directors from that era, like Dario Argento included, were the quality of their work had dipped a lot further,
right.
So I think that's pretty impressive and amazing that like this, maybe that makes me like it a little bit more, even, who knows, but like I just really appreciate that he was able to put this out in what was supposed to be like his twilight years, I guess, for lack of a better term, a time when John Carpenter stopped making movies, and because of his failures, I guess, for lack of a better term, not that I don't like a lot of those movies, but Dario Argento, for example, the stuff he was making at that point, and I don't know, I don't want to start bad mouthing some of our favorite directors, but I love that he was able to put out this movie. And you know what does bum me out, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, I got to meet George Romero once.
Oh, cool.
At a convention, and I don't know if I've ever told you that before, but it's crazy because there's some stars like I can't even think off the top of my head that I haven't met before, but I've been at conventions where they're at, where their lines are like, you have to come back and get a card or whatever for your spot in line, and you got to plan your whole day around meeting them, and it's going to cost you like over $100 to get an autograph, and if you want a picture, that's extra or whatever, like, just like stuff like that. And like, George A. Romero, like this icon, this amazing contributor to the horror genre, like he had like a short line. It was like $60 for an autograph and a picture or something like that, maybe even less. And he was like super like just like personable and friendly, and like it's just like, I was like, something is wrong about this. But again, that says more about the horror community probably, and the people going to these conventions than him. Because this guy should have had the line around the block, honestly. But I thought it was really cool, and I what's funny, since we're talking about it, and when else am I going to talk about meeting George Romero? I think he really liked that I told him my favorite movie of his, which I don't know if this has changed or not, because I kind of go back and forth with a few others, but at that time when I met him, I told him my favorite movie of his was Knight Riders. And I think he was really happy that someone wanted to talk about Knight Riders, so that probably got me some bonus points. And he basically just said that he the reason he made that movie was because he was finally able to like get it like greenlit. I know he had like a good sense of humor about it. But I was just thinking, like, it's a shame that I didn't have an appreciation for Land of the Dead at that time, because I didn't rewatch it until that Scream Factory release, which comes with, I should say this since you don't have this release yet. When you put in your disc, there's a nice little video tribute to George A. Romero at the beginning.
Oh, nice.
Which is really cool, and not just like plays with the disc before the menu even. So it's just really cool images of him on set and smiling and just being him with those those glasses, those iconic glasses, and the ponytail and everything. So I don't know. I'm a big fan of him, and I kind of like am just amazed that he was able to make something so good and so timely, like I said, but also sort of timeless, because like you said, the social issues that are kind of highlighted here aren't necessarily specific to that era of history, that like kind of, like I said, post 9/11 era or whatever, but it does feel kind of perfect for that too. So I don't know. Who would have thought I'd be nostalgic for a movie that recaptures that, but it just works on so many levels for me. Before I forget, I barely took any notes this episode. Apologies to anyone listening if I'm a little bit, all over the place more than usual. I was actually the Superior Court of California will be proud to know that I was like working on cases while I was watching a lot of these movies because I've been so swamped with work. But I did write down a couple of things just that I wanted to mention. I appreciated that Tom Savini appeared playing what looked like the remains of his biker character from Dawn of the Dead. I don't know. Was it supposed to be?
That's what I gather from it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and if not, it's just a fun nod to that or whatever. And then I heard somewhere, and I don't remember if I heard this at the time or I read it somewhere, but I was hoping maybe you can help me with this. I heard that Romero was impressed with Shaun of the Dead, so he cast Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright to be zombies in this, but I don't think I've ever spotted them.
Yeah, there were characters who were kind of like chained. There was like a little bit of a focus on them.
I remember when there was some characters that were the zombies that were chained up, and like people were taking pictures.
Yeah, that's that.
I didn't. Okay, so I've seen that scene a few times and just didn't notice it was.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of makeup on them, so that's
right.
They're barely recognizable. You could see like Edgar Wright's hair, which at the time was like kind of longish, and kind of like recognizable at the time. Yeah, he's more noticeable. He's more noticeable than Simon Pegg.
No, good to know. Good to know.
All right, Land of the Dead, man, good film. Worthy successor to the trilogy, now quadrilogy, going into another movie somehow. Here is the TV spot for that one.
2 news agencies are reporting accounts of the dead returning to life.
From legendary filmmaker George A. Romero.
Yeah, there's an army up there.
Comes his groundbreaking new vision.
From now on, everyone who dies is going to come back.
Of the beginning, of the end.
All that's left is to record what's happening.
George A. Romero's Diary of the Dead.
I think it's time we left this place.
Jason Creed and a small crew of college filmmakers are in the Pennsylvania woods making a no-budget horror film when they hear the terrifying news that the dead have started returning to life. Led by Jason's girlfriend, Deborah, the frightened young filmmakers set off in friend's old Winnebago to try to get back to the only safety and security they know, their homes. But there's no escape from the crisis or any real home for them to go back to anymore. Everything they depend upon, all that they hold dear, is fractured as the plague of the living dead begins to spread. And I actually just got that plot description off of Amazon because I don't own this movie. I actually had never seen it before. until now. So yeah, the Diary of the Dead is. I was aware of this one's existence only because it was under that Dimension Extreme label. I'm not sure if you remember that whole thing, but there was like one movie that I think I liked that came out of that. It was a killer crocodile movie called Rogue, and because of that, I kind of like looked up all the other ones. So I don't think I really got into them, but I just remember seeing that there was a Diary of the Dead out there, and somehow I just never seen it. So, yeah, this was the first one, first time for me, I should say, which was interesting. I you know, so this is a found footage movie, which is unique. It's I don't think George Romero had done anything like that before, and I don't even know if that was necessarily like popular at that time. I can't really think if maybe that was around the same time as something like Cloverfield. Maybe I'm not sure when that came out, but it's certainly not. This isn't like the Blair Witch kind of found footage craze for sure. So, I because it is a found footage movie, there's some kind of like interesting choices that kind of have to be made and explained. And I thought it was hysterical that the person who in the movie supposedly like edited all this footage together, like tells the audience that they added like a score to make it like scarier in certain scenes. And that's like part of like the found footage like experience. And that's something you just don't see every day. And like with most of those kinds of movies, like you have to like accept like whatever contrived reason is given for like continuing to record whatever the events are, in those particular movies. And like this just was like, it was like beyond ridiculous, and it was like intentional for sure. Like it was like the ridiculousness I think was like clearly intentional. Like George Romero definitely like had his like tongue-in-cheek humor, I guess, going on, for lack of a better term. But like it's just, I don't know, it just was kind of like grating on me, like this guy recording while like his friends are being like chased by zombies and stuff like that. One scene in particular, I love that like this character's kind of yelling at him. I don't know, it's just so silly, but yeah, it's like you can definitely see like little like I'm not doing it justice, but there are glimmers of his like wit in here for sure. Wit, but it's like overall like it's pretty forgettable. Like it's to me at least is like pretty uninspired, I guess, for lack of a better term. I don't have like a whole lot of like highlights to like really dwell on. And since we're, I think this is more of a Romero tribute episode than anything, so I definitely don't want to just like point out all the negatives or things that didn't work for me. But like as far as things that I enjoyed, there was like a random like deaf Amish character who like stabbed himself through the head with a scythe. Once a zombie like latched onto him from behind, so to like kill them both. And like that, I don't know, like that shouldn't be like your favorite part of a movie. And like there was also like so like when I mentioned there's a character that's kind of yelling at the guy recording, that character is like, she's not really a major character, I don't feel like, in the movie. She just kind of gets a little scene to shine there. And it's like this blonde, like aspiring actress, who's like she was like the actress in the movie they were making that before all this started. And like she just like randomly like takes their vehicle at the end and like escapes on her own to like survive, and like has like her own like like theme music, like kind of like I think she's like got like a Texas theme like kind of music.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I mean I don't know, again like there's like little parts like that like kind of made me like chuckle and smile and like get a kick out of it and stuff, but like overall it's just and like I do like some found footage movies, you know, like I was really into the Blair Witch Project at that time. I was young enough and dumb enough to think it was real for like a weekend when I saw it, so I was kind of lucky to be that naive, I guess, and get scared. But like overall, like I think a lot of them, it's just, you know, like it's kind of frustrating and annoying, and you just have to be okay with a lot of things that you normally wouldn't be okay with. But you know, in the big picture things, when you look at all the movies that, you know, George Romero made this late in his career, the fact that he decided to do something different like that, like, you know, it's kind of fun that it exists, right? So I don't know. What did you think of this one?
All right, so, you know, what I thought about Land of the Dead was like, this doesn't seem like, you know, a person, like you said, in the twilight of his career. It seems like a young, you know, to the risk of sounding like an ageist, sounds like a younger man's movie.
Sure.
Because there's so much energy to it and pizzazz, and then I think when you watch a movie like Diary of the Dead, you would think that would apply to this because it is following a trend at the time with the found footage stuff coming out. It's an attempt to follow younger characters, in this case, younger filmmakers as they're trying to, I guess, survive the night and the zombie apocalypse. But it doesn't have that energy. It doesn't have that pizzazz of Land of the Dead. It just kind of, the concept weighs it down. It just like you never get a chance to really care about anyone because
a little bit of a prisoner of its own concept for sure.
Yeah, it does become, you know, you see the limitations of the budget because of that. This is like his smallest budget. He went from like a $15 million budget in Land of the Dead to a $2 million budget in Diary of the Dead. So pretty small, right? So very limited to what he can do. And so he has a cast of unknowns. He's shooting in Canada. Like he shot Land of the Dead from Land on out. This is what he's shooting in Canada, right? For financial reasons. He's living in Canada at this point. So
which is funny. Even kind of put that in the plot of Land of the Dead that the Simon Baker character wanted to escape to Canada.
Exactly.
But I got a kick out of that. It's like a throwaway line, but I'm like, oh, like that's kind of cool. Like he's got some like Canada love going on at this point for sure.
Definitely, yeah. It's all about Canada now, and then choices made in the subsequent movie, further illustrates that. I don't know. It just doesn't gel for me, this movie. I don't care about anyone, so when they start getting killed off, it's like, okay. Next. What's gonna happen next? Okay, that happened. That was a cool thing, but it just doesn't really, it ends up becoming forgettable, which is not something you would say normally in a George Romero movie, and this was a George Romero zombie movie. So I was pretty disappointed by this one, to be honest. But, you know, I kind of like understood what he was going for. And, you know, at this point in his career, he's you know, happy to make movies, happy to get them made at this point, because for so long he was having issues in getting movies made. So yeah, he was running with his, you know, whatever concept he came with in this one, and then running with it on a meager budget. It didn't do very well in the U.S. box office because it was more of a home video release, but ended up making some money overseas, which is cool.
Did the theatrical release? Sorry,
yeah, it had a minor theatrical. Actually, both of them did. These two last entries had very, very small theatricals, but they ended up making some money. Well, this one ended up making money more overseas. I think in home side it made $958,000 $1,000 at the U.S. box office. It's pretty small. I remember it playing like maybe one theater in New York or something, or a couple, whatever. It just disappeared pretty quickly, so I never got a chance to see it in theater. So I saw it on DVD when it came out in 2008. Yeah, it just didn't really. Maybe because I didn't see it in the theater, it just didn't really do anything for me. And the generic cast, it was cool having that Colonel character show up. But this is like a running theme, I guess, in these movies now. He shows up as the actress Alan Van Sprang. He plays Brubaker in Land of the Dead. Then he shows up here as the Colonel.
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes up in the next movie with a much bigger character. So there's I
don't know what he was. I thought they called him Sarge or whatever. But yeah, same.
Yeah, he becomes Sarge in the next one. So it's kind of it's a little strange. But yeah, he's changing ranks. So yeah, it's cool what he was trying to go for, but to me it's a little bit of a swing and a miss because while watching it, I had a lot of questions. I think I even posted on Facebook. I have questions for people who are fans of this movie because I didn't quite get it. I didn't quite gel with me. So I was kind of wondering why he was saying what he was saying. Because I thought it was going to be more about the media and the commentary on the media, but really it's a commentary on film students making a project during the apocalypse, which is a fun. It would have been a fun short. I think this movie would have been a good short, but as a movie, I don't know. It doesn't really sustain itself.
Sure, no, maybe if he'd made this for Masters of Horror or something like that,
that would have been cool. Yeah. Strangely, he never made a Masters of Horror. I don't know why, but
which is good for sure.
Yeah, this would have fit in that for sure. And also, those were shot in Canada, were they not? Those Masters of Horror.
I think so. I think Vancouver. I believe you're right. Yeah.
Oh well. So yeah, we don't have a lot to say about this one.
Are there fans? You mentioned that you kind of put it out there.
A couple people were behind it. I think they saw it in theaters, like in Toronto, the film festival. They might have been behind it more. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't connect to this one at all. It's like you, so.
Right. Okay.
What can we do?
No, exactly. It's honestly, he'd already proven anything he needed to prove.
Yeah, exactly.
But especially Land of the Dead, after all those years. So I think that it's okay if some of these later ones, weren't quite up to that, level that we held them at.
All right, so let's move on then to the last of the original Romero films, the zombie films. And here is the teaser.
After the night, after the dawn, after the day, comes Master of Horror George A. Romero's Survival of the Dead. Watch it now on demand before it's in theaters May 28th.
Okay, that was a teaser for Survival of the Dead. I'm going to read off the back of the DVD. Let's see what I got here. Or Blu-ray. The newest film from horror master George A. Romero, legendary creator of Night of the Living Dead franchise, picks up where Diary of the Dead leaves off. On a small island off the coast of Delaware live two families locked in a struggle for power and control over the fate of the undead. The O'Flynns approach the zombie plague with a shoot-to-kill attitude. The Muldoons feel that the zombies should be quarantined and kept alive, in hopes that a solution will be discovered. For both families, existence on Plum Island is a nightmarish world where humans are the minority and zombies rule. Okay, this is the plot for Survival of the Dead, which came out just like a year, really like a year or two after Diary of the Dead. So he was making them pretty quick at this point. I guess he had gotten a budget together. This one was a $4 million budget, double the $2 million budget of Diary of the Dead, and he got to shoot in Canada again, and though this one's set off the coast of Delaware in the U.S. Or off the U.S. It's just, I don't know. This was something I saw as a DVD screener when it came out. So this came I was working at Cam's, it came in, and George Romero movie, and this is like a screener. Came out like 2 or 3 months before it was supposed to come out on demand and in theaters. It was like doing this is an early on demand and in theaters at the same time movie, which we're currently sort of experiencing now. There's a lot of things are going straight to demand. So I got to watch it as a screener. I'm like, okay, if this is good enough, I'll pay my whatever money and go see it in the theater when it comes out in a couple of months. So I watched that screener, and I was like, okay, this is an interesting choice. There's some choices, definitely some choices here. I'm not sure I was totally game to watch a Hatfield and McCoy's story of the zombie apocalypse. I'm like, how did we get here again? From Diary of the Dead? I can understand where they were going with Diary of the Dead, I guess, with that concept, and then we're landing here was a little odd.
A little out of left field.
And then you're landing into a movie about a group of people going into a whole big, like I said, Hatfield and McCoy's drama. They're stuck in this drama, and then of course these two opposing forces are battling each other, and they're stuck in the middle of it. It was an odd concept. I think there were a lot of things that were kind of working against each other. This movie, I would have been cool to see a battle for the island. That would have been cool. Just like these humans battling to each other to get for this island, right? But it gets so lost in its I don't know, its story that it just doesn't really ever go there, and it's a lot of just drama between these characters, and I was kind of bored. I mean, I was strangely bored, which I didn't want to be. I could see inklings of what he was doing with this. I could see where he was going with it, and where it ultimately pays off. Interesting and cool, but it doesn't quite gel together. It's not a cohesive movie to me. It's like some ideas, and then he kind of throws them together, and then some of them work, some of them don't. And yeah, I don't know. That was kind of a mixed bag for me. It really was kind of a mixed bag. I like some of the characters, but it was hard to get into the story of these two older Irish accidented characters. It was very confusing too. Yeah, that aspect of the film.
I mentioned that.
I understand again the commentary on the nature of man and how we're ultimately fighting each other, and even when in a world full of chaos, we're still we just can't agree. There's a two-party system politically right now, and it's really, it's either 50% of this team against 50% of that team, and everyone thinks they're right. No one will give in. It's kind of where we're at politically, and I totally get what he was trying to say there, but it just didn't work in the framework of a zombie movie. It didn't quite come together. And then there's a concept of which is kind of thrown. It's not focused on that much of them trying to teach the zombies how to feed on animals instead of humans. I'm like, that could have been explored more, for sure, but it doesn't get explored that much. It's kind of thrown away a little bit, and then at the sake of making it scary or there's a lot of scare moments that just don't work in this movie, and there's attempts at making characters a bit more exciting and actiony, but it just doesn't quite come together for them. And I wanted them to be in a better movie, those characters, and when they do come into play, and this mix of this, again, Hatfield McCoy's odd story. It's a strange one for me. It's like a Frankenstein kind of movie. It's like things are mixed, like don't quite work together. But oh well. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you said a lot of things that kind of came to my mind too when I was watching this. And I mean, I should say this first, like with Diary of the Dead, like, yeah, that was like my first time watching. But I knew it was out there. I'm not sure if I even knew this one existed. Like, either I hadn't heard of it or I just forgot about it. I think when you mentioned it, like, last week when we were recording and you said we were gonna do, the 6 Romero movies, I honestly couldn't think of the 6th one, so I'd have no idea if I had even known of this movie's existence. So this was a completely new experience to me. I mean, if anything, at least I knew Diary of the Dead was like the found footage one, right? So I had that kind of preconceived notion of whatever that meant, in my mind. So this was just something that I mean, maybe I just wasn't ready for. Like you said, like, it's like, I mean, gosh, like the thing with these two families and the Irish accents, which is so bizarre to me. Like, I don't, like, it's supposed to be, in the United States, on a small island off the coast of the United States, but somehow it's like part of it is like the Ireland with some of these characters, I guess Ireland, and the rest of them are like playing like they're in a Western. It's just so bizarre, the melding. And then you have like these soldiers, like you said, you've got the one soldier who had a really small cameo in Diary of the Dead, and of course Land of the Dead, where he got to turn into a pretty cool looking zombie too. As a different character, I guess. And this is supposed to be the same guy. They like tie it together with Diary, but you've got him and those other soldiers that are with him. They're just so out of place in this weird setting. Like, it's almost like it's a time travel movie or something.
It does, like a time. Yeah, I can see the time travel aspect. Yeah,
so bizarre. It's like they're like Planet of the Apes or something. Like they're just completely like out of their element. It's just so weird. The whole setup and like hierarchy of this island is just so bizarre to me. I don't know what to make of it. There's like randomly like twins, daughters of a character of one of these Hatfield and McCoy characters that's supposed to be like a big reveal or something, but that comes off as like a really like weird like kind of plot choice and twist.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, it's like a movie, like, I'm trying to think of something to say that you haven't said, but like, it's a movie, let me put it this way, it's a movie where you're supposed to be, like, I guess cheering that like zombies are eating a horse at the end or something, like that's supposed to be like some big breakthrough. Like, I don't know, it's just a weird movie. So again, like, this actually probably made Diary look a little bit better to me in comparison, as far as just entertainment value. Because I just, like, even though like I wasn't into that one at all, like I feel like I got a little bit more of that, George Romero humor or whatever, a wit, whatever you want to call it, out of it. Where this one, I just, like, honestly, like, I probably wouldn't have finished this if I just caught it on TV or something,
Right, yeah. I hear you on that. I mean, I like this one a little bit more than Diary of the Dead, only because I wasn't really into that concept of the found footage at all. And this one, I guess I can kind of want to know where it's going, even though it's like so misshapen and weird. Yeah,
this is way more like, what the fuck, like kind of like entertaining, So I think this would have been a fun movie actually to like watch with my brother, like for example, like where we would have just been laughing like the whole time. But like, when you when you only have so much time to watch movies and stuff, and you're just sitting there watching this, and you've got other movies to still get to, because I actually didn't watch these in order, I should say. And there was just other movies that I'd rather have been watching at the time I was watching this. I don't know. And again, like, I just had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what this movie was about. I will say, like, as far as Diary of the Dead, not only is it annoying that you have that found footage thing, but it's also like, mid to late 2000s college kids that you're like hanging out with the whole movie. So there's a lot of things kind of working against it for guys like us. And like in this, like, you definitely get more like colorful characters, I guess.
You get Julian Richings is in this movie. That he has such an odd face. When he shows up, he's like, "Oh, is that? It must be a Canadian movie," because Julian Richings is in this movie.
Yeah, no. So actually, like, this is the kind of movie where like you've got some kind of interesting faces that you've seen before. So you might not know everyone by name,
right?
But it's got like those kind of like character actors that you would expect to see in a George Romero movie. Maybe like, maybe not to the same level as like some of his other movies, of course, but like it's definitely there. And it's since you mentioned Julian Richings, I'll mention Wayne Robson, who's like kind of like this random like first mate for the so that's another thing. It's like one of these guys is like a sea captain or something. I don't want to get into all that, but yeah. So anyways, there's some familiar like character actor guys that I like from other things, and but gosh, it's kind of sad when that's like all you can find to talk about, right? So.
Yeah, it really is like two movies at odds with each other. Like, if they wanted to focus on the army guys and this like, I guess this like team like that kind of like that's assembled together to survive, kind of like Land of the Dead. He has that storyline, and then mixing it with this other storyline just doesn't quite work. But yeah.
And so, like, I was gonna say, actually, like, I almost felt like, and I'm glad you mentioned that, the different storylines, because I was gonna mention this before, I just forgot. Like, I feel like this was one where maybe he was thinking, like, I'll just do one more and kind of throw all my different ideas I had left over into this one. But supposedly he wanted to make more, right? From what I understand.
I think he had a bunch of ideas, yeah.
Like, I think he had like 2 more or 3 more or something in mind. So, that it wasn't even like just everything in the kitchen sink for him. It was like, this is what he wanted to do for this one. So I don't know. It's out there for sure. But at least I can say I've seen it now. So.
Yeah. You get to see a zombie riding a horse.
Yes, exactly. You get to see a zombie riding a horse. That's something you don't see every day, for sure.
There you go. All right, so those are the original 6 George Romero zombie movies. We are big fans of at least 4 of them, which is good.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a good average, right?
I think so.
So because of the popularity of Night of the Living Dead, and for financial reasons, because George Romero did not make much money off of Night of the Living Dead, because there's a copyright thing that we mentioned earlier tonight, he wanted to do a remake to, one, bring the movie to a new audience, a new generation, but also to financially restore some of that money that he should have made from the original film. And that's what he did with the remake of Night of the Living Dead, which came out in 1990. We'll play a TV spot for it here.
They came to pay their respects. They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Show some respect.
Now they're running for their lives. And every road out,
Don't stop no matter what happens.
is just another dead end. George Romero's all-new Night of the Living Dead. Rated R. Starts Friday, October 19th at select theaters.
Okay, that was Night of the Living Dead, 1990, released through Columbia Pictures, produced by 21st Century Film Corporation on October 19th of 1990. So, what is this, like 22 years after the original film? George Romero and company made this new version of basically the same story of a group of people gathering at this farmhouse to survive the zombie apocalypse, right? But this time you get different actors. You get Tom Savini as a director, and Romero as the producer and writer. You get Tony Todd in the lead, Patricia Tallman as Barbara. You get veteran horror actors like Tom Towles, William Butler, and Bill Moseley in familiar roles. He's taking very much the same script of the film, but updating, and it's been tweaked a little bit for a little bit more of a modern spin on it, but never straying too far from the original film, but also giving you something you'd expect in a film from 1990 as well. It's a little bit of the best of both worlds when watching this movie for me. I really was entertained by it when I saw it in the theater. I saw it at the Fort Wayne Theater in Brooklyn, along with Graveyard Shift.
Oh, nice.
So that was a fun double feature. I mean, it was really me sneaking into one after watching one. But it was a fun day. Daytime watching horror movies is always really fun. It was fun for me. I like doing that stuff. I might have skipped school to see these movies. So I did that. But I had a lot of fun. I thought it was a really solid remake of a movie. Like something I won't say these days. Hey, that was a solid remake. It felt like a solid remake. It felt like they were kind of tweaking things, but making them more, like expecting something different from the Barbara character, and seeing Tony Todd in the lead. He hadn't been a lead in a movie up until this point, I don't think. His character just had a lot of gravitas to him, and he has a lot of gravitas as an actor. So he was perfect for the lead of this film, and Patricia Tallman was very much welcome as Barbara. I like her a lot in this movie, and very familiar settings and scenes, but done in a new way, in a new spin. And I think it was really a great meld of Tom Savini's vision along with George Romero's vision. And I know Tom Savini had some issues with the producers who didn't want certain things in certain ways, but he fought his battles and he won his battles. He lost his battles, and I know he might not be as fond of this film, but I think it's a really strong movie. And if you didn't think of it as a remake, I think it's a very strong film on its own, which I don't often say too with remakes. I feel like they often don't work when you separate them, but this one really works. The effects are really good, and the scenes are exciting and tense, and so I have nothing bad, nothing at all negative to say on this movie. I really enjoy it, and rewatching it recently on the Umbrella Blu-ray, I thought it was really fun and entertaining, and I would count it as one of my favorites of the series, even though it's not technically in George Romero's original films, but it's still a George Romero movie. It still has stamps on here, so yeah, I'm a big fan.
That's awesome. I am pleasantly surprised to hear that. I was kind of nervous that you might not be as into this one. Just as a diehard fan of the original, which which happens sometimes. I mean, there's a handful of movies where like I love the originals and the remakes, but I think for the most part, maybe instinctively we kind of like choose sides almost. I don't know. Or especially if you're just kind of fond of a classic and like a remake comes out, it's something that's hard to measure up to. So, Night of the Living Dead, like we said, like that's a classic, right? Of course, but this remake, for whatever reason, I think for at least like the majority of my life that I've been like aware of my like movie fandom and horror movie fandom and all that, like this has been probably my go-to favorite zombie movie. I think like for most of my life that I could think of. Like as a teenager, if you'd asked me, I would have said this is my favorite zombie movie. As in my 20s, if you asked me, I would have said this is my favorite zombie movie. Now, since then, I'm not sure, like, if it's still my favorite because there's so many more that I love. We talked about a bunch of them last episode. We talked about the Return of the Living Dead series, which it's kind of strange that I feel like I was a little bit late to the party with that too, with loving the original as much as I do now. And and obviously that's more of a comedy, but just as far as like a zombie horror movie, at least, like I still think this is probably at the top of my list, even now, even after seeing so many, and even after watching this whole series kind of back to back to back to back to back. So I don't know. I wish that Tom Savini had directed more movies. It doesn't mean they all would have been this good. He was obviously had the benefit of going off of a great script and a great movie that had already been made. But I do feel like he added a lot to it. I feel like there's a lot of great attention to detail here that I love, and that kind of stands out more in the Blu-ray, the Umbrella Blu-ray that you mentioned. That I almost have a more. I already love this movie for its visuals, especially just the way the zombies look, for example, is just something that, and I feel like I go on about this too much, but it's just something that really appeals to me. Like this movie kind of gets that right. For what I like, what I'm drawn to, and that's something that, of course, I took for granted. Watching it again, I knew that's something I liked, but everything else about this too is great. Like the farmhouse is terrific. I love everything about this setting and the cemetery and the way the zombies are dressed or look, and like it's a really good scary movie. And I think the cast is terrific, like you mentioned. I think I love Tony Todd. I'm a big Tony Todd fan in general, but like you said, like when does he get to play the hero, right? I mean, he's either he's known as Candyman, of course, but like when he has been a good guy in movies, it's usually like more of a supporting role. And that's like rare. So it's really cool to kind of see him as Ben, and I think he's great. Like I love him as Ben. And I really, really love Barbara in this movie, Patricia Tallman. I feel like she, like I can see where some people might think like she gets like a little bit too hardcore too fast and is like a great shot and all this other stuff, but I just buy into it, and it's her performance and just the way what she kind of goes through and to survive, and there's something really unique that wasn't done in the original, which I mentioned. I mentioned that Ben's plan kind of turns out to be flawed and gets a lot of people killed, right? So there was Ben's plan and there's Cooper's plan, and you have the same thing here. But this time you have like a third plan by Barbara, which is like we can walk right past them, which is really cool because like why wouldn't you, right? I mean, well, I know why you wouldn't because it's like terrifying, but like it's kind of almost subverts the genre in a way to be like she sees these slow moving zombies out there and realizes like she can just kind of walk through that.
Yeah,
and that's like you just don't like no one had really done that before, so at least not that I could think of. And I don't know, I really love it. It's great. This time you get to hear Cooper call everyone yo-yos, which is really fun. And really like a random insult that I remember when I used to work a takeout at this restaurant that I mentioned back in high school and early college. There was a couple other guys there that I worked in takeout with that were horror movie fans and stuff too, so they were familiar with that too. So we would just go on these like we'd go like a whole shift just calling each other yo-yos and lame brains and whatever else Cooper said, just acting like Cooper, which is super random. But it's just, I don't know, it just kind of came up. I think we were like debating zombie movies one day, and somehow this was like the one that we all loved. And that kind of came out of that. So I don't know, I just have a lot of really fond memories attached to this one. When I did work at that restaurant, I should mention one time Tony Todd came in, and this happened with a few different actors. He came in, and I was probably like, I don't know, 17 or something, and I was just like awestruck to where I don't even think I said two words to him. I was probably staring at him. And years later, like maybe just a couple of years ago, I got to meet him at a convention, and he was like the nicest guy you'd ever meet. He was just so friendly. Like he just wanted to talk about my family because I was there with my family, and he was talking about, what we do for our kids, and I don't know. And he like, it was funny because like I brought up some like comic book movie related stuff because I think I told you this once before that his voice was cut out of Doctor Strange because I know Benicio's a fan, right?
Yep.
And then so like it was so funny because like I feel like he wasn't expecting me to bring that up, and it was like a sore spot. And then he was like, I still haven't watched it because of that. And I was like, but he was just so cool, and like I was probably the only person there that got him to like autograph a picture of himself as Ben and not as Candyman. Because that's just like, and I don't get me wrong, I love Candyman. I think it's one of the greatest movies of all time. But like this character and this role and stuff was just huge to me, and still is. So the cool thing was with this viewing, I hadn't seen this movie for a long time. It maybe even been 10 years, something like that. And Dawn and the original night had been even longer. So it's nice when you go back to a movie that you already loved and it's not only held up, but it's even better than you remembered. So this was just a really great experience there for me too. I don't know, what can I say? I'm glad to hear you liked it too, because it's a good one. It's a great one, honestly.
Yeah, it really does work as a remake for some reason, and as a film on its own. So I'm all for it. Patricia Tallman really deserved more as I know she was a stunt woman and an actor as well, but I really wanted to see her more in lead roles, but unfortunately she never got that chance, which is sad because she was really solid and good here. And instantly relatable, smart, and also, but she has a character arc. She's not quite that right out of the gate. She gets there, and you see her choices that she's making. Like she's being level-headed. She's the antithesis of the Cooper character, and she's using her head, and she's not going for the emotion like the Ben character. So. It's good stuff. I mean, it was a much needed female perspective to the zombie films. Up to this point, you have female characters, but really, like Laurie Cordell in the '85 film, and then of course in Dawn of the Dead. But I feel like it really is front and center here, more in the remake of the original film. And it's wise to go in that direction. I feel like it separates itself, of course, from the original, which was more of a study in PTSD with that character. And so yeah, I like the differences. I like the choices that they made of this one for sure. And the actual makeup and effects are really, really good. So
they're incredible. She's, I was just gonna say she's almost, T2 Sarah Connor before T2 Sarah Connor. It's like she's that like strong and badass. Like you just really like love her, and obviously she doesn't get to shine necessarily in the same way as Linda Hamilton does in that role in that movie. Just a different kind of movie, but like she's really good. And I was thinking the same thing as you were. I kind of pulled up her IMDb while I was watching it because I was like, oh, what else has she done? She's probably in like a million great movies I've never seen, and she didn't get that opportunity for whatever reason. So it's a shame because she's great, like you said, and I really love her in this.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make an honorable mention because I don't think either of us have mentioned it yet. But for both the original and the remake, I really like her brother. I really like Johnny, and this time it's Mosley.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. So I think that in both movies, even though that character, he only gets to be in it for a little bit, I love him. I really get a kick out of him.
Right.
And I thought even in just like a few minutes here, I just really, I really was grinning ear to ear just watching that performance.
And in the original film, the Johnny character is probably one of the early examples of postmodern horror, where he's kind of commenting on the horror of the scene while in the scene, which is cool.
Yeah, he's like Randy or something, right? Yeah, you're right. It's great.
Great
it's
stuff.
Really good example.
Okay, so probably not going to do trailers for the rest of these movies, but
no, there's just a few more we can maybe just touch on.
Let's just touch on them. Yeah. So in the remake sweepstakes, what do we have next? Next up, Dawn of the Dead from 2004. I'll let you lead with this one.
Right. Okay. Sure. So I'm glad I get a chance to talk about this one because I know you mentioned it when you covered the original Dawn of the Dead on your 1979 podcast, and you're not a fan, and that's totally fine. I'm cool with that. But I will say this is one that I'd like to give a little bit of love to. When I mentioned we were kind of having like debates at work and talking about zombie movies and stuff like that. Like this was probably one of them that I was defending, and like I totally see everything, all the flaws in this movie. Don't get me wrong. Like it is very CGI heavy, like unnecessary, like CGI heavy, where like every explosion off in the distance, every fire, every helicopter, everything just looks really fake. And that's kind of unfortunate, but I just think it's a product of its time, and that's just kind of comes with the package. And I don't know, I was really into this movie from the first time I saw it in theaters, and it might have like, God, I don't know, maybe I'm just a sucker for like them using like a great Johnny Cash song in the intro that I love, The Man Comes Around. And maybe when I was younger, something like that was like enough for me to think like, oh, this movie's cool. But I just really like this one. I think it has a really good cast. I really like Sarah Polley. I really like Ving Rhames in this role. I think that the supporting cast is pretty great. There's a lot of familiar faces and character actors. I do think there's some talent involved in making this movie. Maybe so I don't know. This is the thing. Like so it's written by James Gunn, who's done a lot of good stuff as far as I'm concerned. Especially as someone who likes like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, for example, and and of course he's done stuff like Slither that I think genre fans would be pretty big on. So he's got some street cred, I guess, there. And then more divisive is Zack Snyder, who directed this, who's made a lot of stuff that I don't like and even hate. But he's also made a few things that I really love. So it's kind of I don't know, I'm in a weird place with that guy. I think his fans annoy me more than it kind of works against him, because he does kind of have like this weird fan loyalty now, especially with stuff like his DC movies that he made or whatever. But that's a whole other story. Yeah, this is much earlier in his career. So yeah, I don't know. There's some talent there. I'm not a big fan of the running zombies. In general, like there's a few movies that I like where that just they happen to be those kind of movies. This is one of them. But this movie, I think, has a really fun opening, a really strong opening, where Sarah Pauli's kind of chased out of her house from her, by her undead husband, and you just see like this pandemonium unfolding in her neighborhood, and some of it looks ridiculous, again, because I said there's a lot of CGI and stuff like that. But like, I don't know. I really enjoyed it and got a kick out of seeing that and seeing the way the movie kind of starts. And then I really like the characters at the mall, even though it's a much bigger ensemble than the original Dawn of the Dead. And not every character stands out. Not every character is well fleshed out or likable, like in the original Dawn of the Dead. But at the time that I saw this, that I was probably too young to really care about that. And again, the original Dawn of the Dead wasn't a movie I was really precious about back then. So I don't know. This just did a lot of things that I thought were really cool and was really into. But before I get too carried away, I will say there's a scene in this movie that makes me roll my eyes every time, and I wish it had been left out or written differently, and that is something that I think you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, which is the zombie baby, which almost makes me like embarrassed to like this movie, like every time that scene comes up, because it's just so like, yeah, it's not scary, it's not like, I just think it's like cringy and it's really bad CGI, and like that whole plot or subplot, like what they did with, and you have a good actor in there, Mekhi, Phifer's done a lot of other better performances and stuff, but like what a waste of that actor and that character to have his only character arc be, protecting his pregnant girlfriend or wife, whatever she was. And then after she gets bit, making sure that she, as a zombie, delivers the zombie baby. And that whole thing to me, it's just like, again, like I don't even know if like saying it's like cringy or whatever is the right term. It's just kind of lame, I think, for lack of a better term, for what is, other than that, is kind of like a cool, fun movie. So yeah, I don't know, it's interesting because this came out right around the same time as Land of the Dead. This came out in 2004, I believe, and at the time I was more into this, which is interesting now looking back. That might just be, again, me in my early 20s or something, right? So I don't know if I feel the same way now, but I still do really enjoy this movie a lot. And to be clear, because I didn't say this with The Night of the Living Dead, I just want to make it clear, I'm not a person who even watches a lot of remakes. Like, there's so many remakes that have come out now even that I'm just never going to see because I'm just not interested. And even some that have had theatrical releases and have had some positive buzz behind them. I just still haven't seen them. Like, there's just so many, and it's a really long list. I mean, I don't even know where to start. But and a lot of them that I have seen, I hated too. So I don't know. I don't have like a great history with remakes. I'm pretty hard on them in general. But then again, like my favorite movie of all time is technically a remake with The Thing. So it's a weird, balance there. You could go a lot of different ways with remakes. You can be very true to the original, almost scene for scene, like a movie like Psycho or like Night of the Living Dead is almost. But I kind of like that this was different and had its own tone and its own movie. The only thing it really has in common is that whole I guess hunkering down in the mall. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling about this one, but I'm glad to get a chance to talk about it because I am a fan.
That's cool. I talked about someone on the 1979 when we went Dawn of the Dead. Every time I try to watch this one, it just doesn't work for me. And I think the cast is good. It's not their fault. I think they're good. I'm just not a Zack Snyder. I'm not on board for Zack Snyder's style.
For the most part.
So I'm not faulting the writer, James Gunn, with some of that. I just don't connect to it, I guess. Maybe I am faulting the writer because I feel like this doesn't quite have anything to say like Dawn of the Dead does. It doesn't really say much about what Romero clearly had a vision and a commentary on society, and I just don't see that happening in zombie movies at this point. I don't quite see that outside of Romero's films.
Right.
Certainly in The Walking Dead as a series, which we haven't talked about yet. There's no commentary there. It's just like even Romero said, a soap opera with zombies.
Well,
and this
we haven't
one,
talked about it because I've never seen the Walking Dead.
There you go. That's what it is. Trust me. And this one feels like, an excuse to have zombies. I don't know. It doesn't really work. And then when they get to the mall, it's a completely generic mall. There's no like, a lot of the scenes in this movie are like them sitting at a coffee bar, like at a Starbucks like coffee thing, and just like talking. They're not going to the stores. They're not taking advantage of the mall. Why? What's going on? Did they not have access to the mall? I had all these questions while watching this movie. Why are they not utilizing this mall? It was frustrating for me because I like malls and movies. Yeah, it's not. And the style, the style just doesn't work for me. That kind of handheldy and trying to fake tension kind of thing. But I can see where it would work for others, and so I respect that. And I like Sarah Polley a lot in the lead, and I like the actor who plays the guy lead whose accent occasionally slips.
I was gonna mention him too, Jake Weaver.
Yeah,
I'm glad you brought
from
him up.
Wendigo, right?
Yeah. That's. Oh, is he? That's right. Yeah. I didn't make that connection right away. I knew I knew him from somewhere.
And Ving Rhames. There's definitely good things about it, and I just given up trying to be a fan of Dawn of the Dead remake. It's not going to work for me at this point. So
yeah, I get it for sure. I will say, I don't even know how to describe it. There's like certain deaths that characters have in movies that are like kind of make you cheer even when they're good guys that you're rooting for, just because they're really cool. I think of like Aliens. I think of like Hudson and Aliens or something like that. And I feel like this has like a bunch of those for me, like towards the end, and it's kind of interesting because it's like not necessarily like characters that you would think would be heroic or that you would like that kind of go out on a cool note. But he, that character in particular, the Jake Weaver's character, who I know I've seen in something. I don't know if it's Wendigo or something else, but now that you've said that, it's bugging me. He gets like this kind of this death scene that I really enjoy. I don't know why. I just think it's really cool. And again, this is probably, early 20s Ara, just thinking that stuff like this was so heavy and no one had done it before when I just didn't know any better. But, he sees that he's been bitten, and he kind of makes sure he gets Sarah Polly to safety, and everyone else he lets them go on their way. And he's like, I'm just kind of stand here and watch the sun come up, which is kind of cool for a movie called Dawn of the Dead. And then, you see him put the gun up to his head as the zombies are running up from behind and stuff. And I don't know. I think that this movie, it just has a lot of like little things like that have stuck with me. Like, this is one that, for whatever reason, even though I haven't necessarily seen it even recently, I just remember it well. Like, I remember the plot and I remember the characters and stuff like that. So I don't know what it is. Everyone has different things that kind of connect to them and stuff. And a lot of it, I think, does have to do with like when you see movies and how old you are and what you're into and stuff like that. And this is, I mean, again, like, I think everything from Day of the Dead in '85 to Land of the Dead, with the exception of the Night of the Living Dead remake, like, I mean, it just feels like everything was getting like really actiony, and this is more like almost like action comedy that just happens to have like, and not like comedy, more like dark humor here and there, but like it's not, it's just not as well thought out or deep or meaningful or and not, you're not getting the same things that you got from the original Dawn of the Dead out of this, and I totally get that. It's more of like a popcorn movie, I guess, but I don't know, for whatever reason I just saw it at the right time and was really into it, and then I kind of thought I wasn't gonna like it now because of how much I hated, like, Batman versus Superman and like a lot of other stuff that Zack Snyder's done now, and like I watched it and I was like, I still am into this movie, so I don't know. It's just one that I'll defend, but again, we all have our weird movies that we defend for whatever reason, and this is just fun for me.
Yeah, let's piss off the Snyder loyals. See what happens.
Yeah. Oh my gosh!
Our podcast is over.
Yeah, I think that's made me dislike him more than anything. Oh my god! I need to stop reading like comments on.
Yeah, I think that can, for any movie that you should read comments.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Absolutely not good. All right, so after this one, there was a Night of the Living Dead 3D movie in 2006. Never saw it, so it doesn't exist for me. And then in 2008, there was a Day of the Dead remake. Wow, what to say about Day of the Dead? Maybe one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my.
Even outside of it being a remake of the great Day of the Dead, which we talked about today, it doesn't work as a movie at all. It's really, really poorly done. And it was directed by Steve Miner, of all people. Steve, why? Why are you doing this? Why do you do this to me? And I think it was written by the guy who wrote Final Destination, the first one, Jeffrey Reddick. So, yeah, I don't know what's happening here. It's so badly directed. There's so much bad CGI in it. It's just bizarre. It's like it becomes viral in this movie, and then people immediately turn to zombies. They get like all these weird sores over their face, like when they turn to a zombie, like the moment they turn to a zombie. and their eyes get weird colors, and it's just and then there's like really fast moving, handheld jerky kind of style. And then there's so much CGI. There's like a lot of nonsense of the characters moving from here to point A to point B to point C. Don't know why. I'm not even getting into the specifics why what they're doing, where they're going. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's just an excuse to have, like, I guess, set pieces, if you want to call them that. But they're kind of ineptly strung together. So it really bears barely any resemblance to the original film. There is a Rhodes character, this time played by Ving Rhames again. Ving Rhames playing Rhodes, but then he's kind of like a nice character, and then he dies pretty quickly in the movie, so there's that. It's a strange movie, and I forgot Mina Savari is the lead. She's a military person who has to save her family, I guess, and find out what's going on, and eventually they do, and it's a strange, bizarre kind of throwaway thing, and it's just poorly done from beginning to end. Nick Cannon is in this movie, and he's really annoying in it. It's just a terrible, terrible, terrible movie. I don't know what else to say.
That's so. Honestly, you mentioned this movie. When we were exchanging messages, getting ready for this episode, and I don't know if I knew about this. Again, like, this is, maybe I'd heard about it at some point. Maybe I'd seen the DVD at some point, and I just like forgotten about it. I don't know, but like. I'm like almost curious to like check it out now.
I stood with it through the whole thing because I'm less curious. Where's this thing going? Where's this train wreck of a movie going?
Yeah, but there's like, Steve Miner, like, he is still making good movies, like in the late '90s at least I can think of. I'm not sure that off the top of my head, but like. That's just so bizarre, and that cast. And I wonder, like, I would be interested in seeing Ving Rhames playing like a Rhodes type character in a good movie, like seeing him as like that kind of a like intimidating villain, maybe. So like when you mentioned he's that character, like I was kind of like, oh, that could be good, but. It sounds like it's not, like it's totally wasted, and nothing good comes from that anyway.
Yeah, they just had the character name, and that they didn't know what to do with it, and so like, oh, we'll tie it together, Day of the Dead with Dawn of the Dead remake, like getting Ving Rhames,
I don't know. Yeah, that's just, it seems. That's, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know what to make of that cast when I'm looking at it. It's
just avoid it. You'll be okay. So bad.
Well, I'm glad you saw that, so I don't have to. I'll say
took one for the team. This is not zombie proper related. The Crazies remake came out in 2010. Just to give you an idea that they were remaking. At this point, they were trying to remake Romero's films. Going through his catalog to remake his films and The Crazies, which I actually thought was entertaining when I saw it. I don't remember a whole lot about it, other than that Timothy Olyphant was the lead, and he was good, and I just thought it was entertaining. And, again, movies are getting more actiony and more like... they're becoming a little different, these horror movies. So, going a different route. But I thought it was well done for what it was.
For sure. I think it's a good one, yeah.
And then after the 2010, we got Night of the Living Dead remake again in 3D. 2013, rather. I didn't see that one either, because why would you want to see these movies? Again, these are people who are again taking advantage of the fact that there's no copyright on the Night of the Living Dead movies, so they're releasing them in these weird 3D versions and then making these bad movies in 3D. So
there's 2 Night of the Living Dead 3D movies.
There are 2 of them
that we haven't seen.
We don't need to see.
I don't know what to do with this information. It's
Yeah.
like in my...
It's definitely not good. And then recently there was a Day of the Dead sequel to the remake called Day of the Dead Bloodline, and I do believe there is a bub character in that one. I think it's played by Jonathan Skyich, that guy, however you pronounce his name, but yeah, he's playing Bub.
I think you're talking about.
Yep. And this one, I have no desire to see it, so I will never see it. I heard it was really bad too, so yeah.
I'm pulling it up right now, actually, just out of curiosity, and yeah, I don't think I'm gonna see this one either. That's a shame.
We're good. We have enough good Romero zombie movies to satisfy us. We don't need to go into some of those other ones there. We don't need to be tempted by that flesh. I watched When Romero Met Del Toro. It was one of those extra features, and that was one of those features. I think it was from Arrow, an Arrow feature on one of the Blu-rays, and that was really cool to see that. Their conversation together, and it kind of traces Romero's career, and Del Toro asked some pretty cool questions. So I had fun revisiting these Romero movies and the extra features. I think it really, like I said, I have a new love and appreciation for him as a filmmaker. And not every one of them swings and hits it out of the park, but he definitely had a lot to say, which is really cool, and those first 4 movies really do it for me, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have a newfound appreciation for the first 2, which I always respected, but didn't think were necessarily my taste, and I even like the latter 2 that we mentioned more than I already did now. So. I think it's a great series. You can kind of ignore the last 2 if you want. I don't think you're missing anything. But again, considering like how many years this series spanned, I do think it's pretty cool that you got one director, writing these 2 for the most part, and his vision, and he got to kind of do what he wanted. And I think that's pretty great. I think he was a one of a kind director who's sorely missed in this day and age. So I can't even tell you how honored I am to get to be on the episode that talks about him and some of these movies. So you know what I almost forgot to mention before we sign off here. I should say this. So you going back to the Night of the Living Dead, the remake.
Yep.
I think that, and apologies if I did bring this up, but I feel like I completely forgot because again I didn't take a whole lot of notes in preparation this time around. But I actually told Tony Todd and Tom Savini both when I met them that. I'm a huge fan of the Night of the Living Dead remake. I like it even more than the original. And they both kind of laughed at me. So I just wanted to throw that out. They were both like really nice about it, and they both just kind of laughed. And hearing you say that Savini kind of wasn't necessarily happy with some things, it makes sense now because I think he just kind of like didn't look that like excited about that. He was just kind of like, yeah, a lot of people say that, to me or whatever. Yeah, so I don't know. And Tony Todd just kind of laughed and was like, well, it's just a different time. And like, if you'd seen Night of the Living Dead, like when I saw it, like you'd probably think differently. So yeah, even they kind of just laughed at me when I said this. I just wanted to put that out there before I forgot, because that's another fun memory I in relation to this series. So yeah, I don't know. Thanks though for giving me the chance to ramble. Oh, and my power just turned back on.
Oh yay! His power turned on. So at some point during this podcast, Ara lost power, which is he thought he was actually living in the zombie apocalypse.
Yep. Yeah, we were pretty sure it was the end, but we kept recording anyways. Now everything in my house is turning back on.
This is what we do for you guys. We record during a blackout.
Yeah, it's been a good hour that I was sitting here with a candle. So yeah, there you go.
Well, Tony Todd may have laughed, but at least he didn't say, "I'll see you soon," or whatever he says from the Final Destination movie. So
oh right, yeah, exactly. It could have been much worse.
Well, thank you for being my victim on this episode and partaking of the flesh of all these films, and it's been a wild ride talking about zombies all month long. We've been watching zombie movies all month long, and it was nice to finish on a master's work.
Yes.
And attributing our favorite zombie director of all time, George A. Romero, of course, a director who's done other things and things that we also really love, like Martin and Monkey Shines and The Dark Half and several other films. I really like Season of the Witch, too. There's a lot of great things he's done. He's hit a lot of different kinds of notes in his career, but will always, of course, be remembered for these zombie films, and we love him for it. Thank you, George, so much. We really appreciate everything you left behind, and we'll be watching them forever.
Yeah, absolutely. These have stood the test of time and will continue to stand the test of time. And one day our kids will be talking about Night of the Living Dead. And that's saying something.
That's definitely saying something. And I'm curious how they're going to react to these movies one day. And that's going to be exciting to find out. That's the joy of these films. We can introduce them to new generations. And I love that. It's so great. Yeah. Thank you, R, again, and thank you guys out there in Patreon land for supporting the show, and have a very happy Halloween. This should be out for Halloween, so hope you enjoy your holiday, and thank you again for supporting the show. You can find us in the usual spots on Facebook and Instagram, send them to Meep, and where else? On YouTube. The podcast is on YouTube. We're looking for Retro Movie Love there. And where can they find you?
Well, I mean, gosh, the only thing I really have to plug is I created an Instagram account, which I mentioned before, which is basically just to kind of share stuff in my collection. And I'm really narrowing it down even less than that and just sharing movies. So, because I have a lot of other movie-related stuff I could get into. So, yeah, that's been kind of fun. If anybody likes seeing stuff like that and wants to see some cool editions from all over Europe and here, then feel free to give me a follow. I'm at ara.j.mccready on Instagram. And other than that, I would say just make sure you follow all of Meep's stuff, because he's doing more interesting things than I am out there.
No. Well, thank you, Ara. You're doing the great work of showing your collection. I love your collection. I love seeing it on your posts. And,
thanks.
The irony is not lost that we're big consumers with Blu-rays. But, I think, we're doing it for a reason. We want to hold on to these memories of these films.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we know that physical media is something that will last a lot longer than the intangible streaming. Amazon recently is battling someone in court, saying that movies that you buy on Amazon, you don't own outright. So so there's that. That's information was dropped earlier today. So streaming is not something you can hold in your hand, and you literally don't own it. Blu-rays and our physical media, I think, is going to last a little bit longer, hopefully, and so I'm there for that. I'll be the mad consumer of Blu-rays.
Yes, I will gladly. You'll find my body buried under like a fallen shelf of Blu-rays one day, and I'll be happy to go out that way.
And then you'll come back.
Yeah, exactly. It, honestly, it does make me sad when you see people post about movies and all the comments are, "Oh, is this streaming? Where can I find this streaming?" And I'm just like,
barf.
These movies are everywhere for you to get. Like, it's not hard, but I don't know. It's just a different time we live in. But we'll keep fighting the good fight. What else can we do?
Yes, we'll come back as zombies, and what are we going to do? We're going to be watching our Blu-rays.
Yeah.
That's the true evolution of the zombie.
Oh,
we'll be zombies for our movies. Thank you guys again so much. This has been so much fun. I think it was a good place to end there.
Yeah.
Take care, guys. Take care.
All right. Thanks so much, Meep. It's been a blast.
Ciao for now.
Attention all shoppers. Attention all shoppers.
It's the end of the world. I wanna live inside a shopping mall. I wouldn't care about the isolation. I'm unconcerned about the Walking Dead. If it's the end of the world, I think I'd handle myself quite well. I wouldn't panic walking past the zombie. I'd try to catch up on some reading and movies. I know all I need to know. I know all I need to know. I learned everything from George Romero, Dario Argento, maybe Tom Savini, Stuart Gordon, and Sam Raimi. Did they plant the idea, or was it always in me? Do you find me creepy? Yeah, do I give you the creeps? It's the end of the world. We could gather half a dozen friends. We live in hiding over J.C. Penney. Construct a wall to keep the mutants out. When it's the end of the world, we land a helicopter on the rooftop. Somebody breaks in through a boarded entrance. Maybe we could make a run for it. I know all I need to know. I learned everything from George Romero, Dario Argento, maybe Tom Savini, Stuart Gordon, and Sam Raimi. Did they plant the idea, or was it always in me? Do you find me creepy? Now it's the end of the world. I always thought I would have been more careful. Didn't look to be a serious spy. Will you wait here till I come back to life? I learned everything from George Romero, Dario Argento, maybe Tom Savini, Stuart Gordon, and Sam Raimi. Did they plant the idea, or was it always in me? Do you find me creepy? Post-apocalyptic zombie survival fantasy.
I've been thinking, maybe we got a good thing going here. Maybe we shouldn't be in such a hurry to leave.
We're still here.
They're after us. They know we're still in here. They're after the place. They don't know why. They just remember. Remember that they want to be in here.
What the hell are they?
They're us, that's all. There's no more room in hell. What? Something my granddaddy used to tell us. You know Macumbo? Voodoo. Granddad was a priest in Trinidad. He used to tell us, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.